7 years later, at the Baskerville clan's training camp, a fierce bear-like creature lifted its head. It growled, then expanded its massive body, thundering towards the knights of the Baskerville clan. With expressionless faces, they prepared their swords to confront it. The beast charged forward, looking ravenous. Immediately, the swordsmen leaped up, raising their swords to strike down. Viker stepped in, hitting the creature on its horn. It retaliated by swinging its enormous hand towards him. The other swordsmen moved in one after another. Outside, a man stood observing. He was the trainer, one of the staff members of the Baskerville clan. He shouted instructions. If you have to fight a stronger opponent, the best thing to do is find an opportunity to run far away. Don't be greedy trying to kill them. It's more effective to aim for their legs. Suddenly, from behind the swordsman, someone shot forward with incredible speed. They were the triplet brothers of the Baskerville clan, ready to take on the monster together. Finally, they looked at the creature and introduced themselves one by one. We are highbrow, middlebrow, and low. Loving the bear had left it drained from the magical blow. The trainer observed and reflected just as expected from the young masters, highbrow, mid-pro, and lowbrow. Their auras have matured. The dark red hue surrounded the beast as it lowered its head. Seeing it thoroughly disheartened, the knights rushed in to deliver the final blow. In the end, the beast's blood splattered across the floor. The trainer clapped his hands and praised. Well done, everyone. After the training, the swordsman lined up in front of the trainer. He began to speak. With the achievement just reached, all of you have become elite swordsmen. After 100 rounds of practice, you have mastered the first technique of the Baskerville blade. From this moment on, your 7 years of training. Behind the coach was the cold corpse of the bear. He continued, unlike the oxbear trapped in this cage, the oxbears on Mount Liru Eleno are much stronger than the ones here. Even I'm not sure if I can handle them. I want everyone here to deeply remember the encounter with that undead creature today. It's no different from what you'll face on your upcoming journey. Death is always closer to us than you think. With your talent and enthusiasm, I'm sure you'll overcome the challenges ahead. Or you can gather experience and strive to survive with everything you have. Then the coach raised his hand in salute and added, now I congratulate all of you on successfully graduating. The young knights below also raised their hands in salute. He concluded, I wish everyone good luck in the battles ahead. During the break, everyone paired off to chat. 2 young knights sat nearby. One of them started, hey, which knight team are you planning to join? He continued, I have 3 choices. The first is Doberman, the second is Pimple, and my third choice is Rottweiler. The other person replied, well, it looks like we won't be on the same path. I want to join the Wolfhound Knights of my own. There are a total of 7 missions for the Knights of the Baskerville family. Each mission will train our minds. Right now, the missions we can take are investigation, protection, assassination, suppression, and direct confrontation. The first person asked again, furthermore, where do you think he's going? The other person was surprised. He immediately looked back and said, it's pretty obvious. That was Viker, sitting on top of another monster, the one the first knight had mentioned, Viker van Baskerville. When he heard his name, he turned with a curious grunt. All of his teammates were below, discussing. He was handling a giant oxbear, larger than the one we just took down, and I bet he's a high-level swordsman, one person said. I heard he has achieved the 3rd fang, another chimed in. The first person was instantly surprised. A 3rd fang? That means he's at the same level as those hunting dogs. Viker heard the whispers around him, but stayed silent. He thought to himself, time is passing more slowly than I expected. In reality, he was currently a mid-level swordsman, 5th fang. It had taken him a full 7 years to level up from a low-level swordsman to a mid-level one. While he had truly surpassed his previous level in swordsmanship, this progress was still slower than he had planned. As Viker sat lost in thought, he heard his butler call from behind, young Master Butcher. He turned and replied, Barrymore. The butler continued, the master of the house is looking for you. It seems your position has been decided, young master. Viker fell silent for a moment before saying, I understand. In Hugo's office, he approached the old man's desk. It's been a while, sir. How have you been? The master of the house, Hugo, grunted in response. Viker observed him closely and noticed something, so he asked, what happened to the scar on your nose? Hugo heard him and touched the scar, then replied, when I faced the savage tribes in the Liru Eleno mountains, I was attacked by someone wielding a knife. Viker asked, did you catch them? The old man replied, no. However, I left a scar on that witch's face. Anyway, congratulations on completing your training. Viker responded, thank you. Hugo added, it's going to get even tougher from now on. In his mind, he thought, he's talking about my deployment. At this time in my past life, I became a squire for the Pitbull Knights and was sent to the Liru Eleno Mountains for 21 months. Facing countless life and death situations, I was thrown into actual battlefields just like a piece of rotten meat discarded carelessly. The Baskerville children would be split into elite groups or mercenaries after turning 15. When mercenaries died on the battlefield, the elites would learn about political roles and governance. After accumulating vast battlefield experience, mercenaries would begin serving the elites, helping them advance in politics and rule. The skill that bridges the gap between elites and mercenaries is the Baskerville swordsmanship. The fifth fang. This is why my swordsmanship only reached the fourth fang in my past life. There's no way Hugo would let a talented kid like me waste my gift in the elite course. Ending his thoughts, Hugo spoke up, "Father, I want to try to become a senator." Hearing this, Viker was taken aback. He wondered, "A legislator?" The old man replied, "A legislator who oversees the laws in the Baskerville territory. You will uphold justice and attract businesses to this area. In simpler terms, you will be responsible for everything big and small in our family." Viker wasn't quite ready for this. He thought to himself, Hugo really wants to make someone as talented as me into an elite. Then the old man laughed and continued, "What you achieve will put you ahead of other talents, at least for the next decade, right? That's why I'm giving you a fitting opportunity. You will serve as the deputy consul for a city called Underdog, also known as the City for the Weak. Right now, both the consul and deputy consul positions are vacant. Do you agree with this proposal?" Viker responded, "I will do as you wish, but first I want to say a few things." The old man asked, "What is it?" Anne explained, "It's about a dispute over a gem mine with the Morg family." When Hugo heard this, he pondered and replied, "Do you have a problem with the Morg family? I won't say I'll give you a reward. Are you asking about a reward?" At that moment, Viker boldly stated, "I want to borrow from them." The butler, John, looked surprised. Viker continued, "If this request is too difficult, you don't need to worry about it." Without hesitation, Hugo stamped his approval on the document, saying, "It's not a problem at all." Hugo smiled and added, "I trust you won't do anything foolish, my son." Viker responded, "I won't do anything to trouble you. No matter how many times it happens, I still can't get used to the way this jerk calls me my son." Hugo mentioned he would provide me with a support fund for my past life. I never imagined something like this would happen. Viker left the hallway with John. As they walked, John called out, "Young master." Viker turned to him, and John smiled warmly, saying, "The head of the family values you." As John walked and talked, he said, "He didn't immediately throw you into real combat, and even gave you a consular position. Isn't that the path of a future ruler? I'm sure he values you highly." Viker replied with a gloomy expression, "Only if I perform well as a deputy consul." John paused at this, but Viker continued walking. "Better yet, if I can effectively use the authority of a deputy consul, I can safely elevate my skills to a new level." Suddenly, memories flooded back, the image of an adult Viker facing execution by beheading. He recalled his thoughts, "I don't care about my current job. It can't erase my memories." At that moment, standing in front of Viker was the adult version of himself, Hugo. He still remembered the sensation of his head detaching from his neck on the execution platform. Viker walked away, leaving John, the bewildered butler, behind. He muttered to himself with a cold determination, "I'll make you feel that sensation too, just like I did." Hugo left. A vast city spread out before the screen. This was the territory of Baskerville, home to the city of Underdog. At the consulate, the elderly manager stood outside, rambling, "Oh wow, the new deputy consul will arrive tomorrow. You all need to clean this place up thoroughly. He's coming from the main castle, so pay extra attention." Two workers swept in the courtyard. One responded, "Yes, sir." Then he returned to this task, not forgetting to chat with the other worker. "What do you think the new deputy consul will be like? I hope he has some experience in business." The other worker raised an eyebrow. "Hey, haven't you heard?" Suddenly, someone entered with assertive footsteps, but the two workers continued their conversation. "I heard he's only 15 years old." Upon hearing this, the other worker gasped, "What? Just 15? The first worker added, "What can we possibly expect from a 15-year-old? The other sighed. But when the other person looked up, he saw a figure glide by, about the same age as the teenagers. Immediately, another staff member approached, thinking to himself, "Who is this kid? Has another employee brought him here?" He placed a hand on the kid's shoulder and said, "Hey, this isn't a place you're allowed to be." The kid turned, and it was Viker. He commanded with a warning tone, "Let go of me right now." This left the two staff members stunned. "This is," one of them started to say. Then they awkwardly laughed and replied, "I see you came early, Consul." Another one whispered, "Why is he here a day early?" At that moment, Viker pointed at one of the men and said, "You, get some drinks and women ready right away." He turned on his heel and walked up the stairs with his suitcase and cane, not forgetting to add, "I need to throw a party." This left the staff members staring in disbelief. A party? Inside the hall, they set up a variety of foods, and outside, the noble class arrived to enjoy the gathering. The only person standing in the lobby was Chihuahua Baskerville. He was the manager at the Underdog office and was feeling quite frustrated. Through the window, he silently watched the partiers. He thought bitterly, I can't believe it. He's throwing a party on his very first day in charge. What a ridiculous choice. Everyone has had a tough time with the previous consul, who was demoted for bribery. But throwing a drunken party at a sacred workplace is just... Chihuahua turned his thoughts into words. How could that guy be such a jerk? Right, let him ruin everything. I bet the whole city will be destroyed before he wakes up. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind him. It was the new deputy consul, Viker, who asked in a menacing tone, "Are you the manager?" Chihuahua jumped. He quickly turned to face the consul, thinking to himself, when did he get here? Viker introduced himself then. I'm the newly appointed deputy consul, Viker van Baskerville. He heard this and stammered, introducing himself again. My name is Chihuahua Baskerville. Viker murmured his name, Chihuahua Baskerville. Don't you have a middle name? Chihuahua clenched his hands. He thought to himself, another one? If someone doesn't have a middle name, it means they're from outside the clan. Simply put, they're not family, they're just employees. I can't believe these jerks come in and treat me like this just because of that. Viker placed a hand on Chihuahua's shoulder and smiled, saying, me. This made him widen his eyes in surprise. Huh? Viker turned away. Chihuahua was still frozen. What? He then opened a book and started asking basic questions. I looked over your personal information before I got here. You're from this city, right? Chihuahua replied, yes, I was born and raised here. Viker continued, so you know the situation here very well, Tokyo. I know a lot about the challenges that people working in the field have been facing. I don't intend to interfere with your work, so I hope you keep doing a great... Chihuahua felt a bit awkward and replied, yes. He wondered, what is this all about? Is this some new way to bother someone? Why is he here after the party? After reading for a while, Viker closed the book and said, there's nothing wrong with federal law. There are a few strange things in the justice system. Hearing this, the man was surprised. You finished reading that already? In such a short time. Viker continued, the issue with these weaklings is that there are quite a few underground market businesses operating, and that economy exists on the foundation of the law. The problem will be solved just by shutting them down. We'll need to take out each key leader of those underground markets. Chihuahua fell silent, looking out the window before adding, the role of the vice consul is to create laws and enforce them. I also have to respect the laws that were established previously, but I will add a new law to the existing ones. He was surprised. You're going to enact a new law? Viker replied, it will completely drain that underground market within a week, but if I want to create a new law and enforce it. Chihuahua wondered, why do you need a reason when they're doing something illegal? He responded, I'm still young and new to this role, and I'll only officially take over tomorrow. To convince them, I need to put on a show. Viker smiled excitedly and said, so I'll set up some bait to attract the flies. Chihuahua thought to himself, oh my, is he actually coming up with a plan? In the main square of Underdog on Port Smile Street, the crowd bustled with people. They gathered to discuss something. At a public notice board, a figure stood with authority before the crowd. Chihuahua and his aides watched from the outside. Two aides behind him began to speculate. What's the deputy consul's plan? The other replied, how would I know? He's been standing there since early morning, but look at how many people have gathered. At that moment, Viker spoke up, listen carefully. I am the new... People below were chatting. He looked so young back then, so cute. A dissenting voice responded negatively about Viker. What could a kid like that possibly do? He interjected, I'm sure all of you have read the public notices posted here. Even though the deputy consul has changed, the self-governing laws of the Baskerville family are still in effect. Viker added, the Baskerville Self-Governing Constitution, Section 20, will remain unchanged. On the notice board, Section 20 of the Constitution included laws with corresponding penalties. Article I-1, gambling, punishment, hand chopping. Article I-2, illegal money lending, punishment, eye extraction. Article I-3, illegal adult entertainment, punishment, face tattoo. Article I-4, lobbying, punishment, exile. Article I-5, tax evasion, punishment, breaking the ankle. Article I-6, illegal immigration, punishment, water stabbing. Article I-7, illegal drugs, punishment, tongue removal. Article I-8, embezzling military supplies, punishment. A group of 3 young men started to mutter scornfully. I doubt they'll keep all that. The guy in the gray shirt replied, those in power always do that. The one in the white shirt smirked and said, I suspect it will take quite a while for him to lobby to maintain control over the territory. Chihuahua, who had been lurking in the shadows, quickly interjected with concern, you fool, have you forgotten who is responsible for your safety? He then spoke to everyone. He comes from the main castle of the Baskerville family. Should I draw my sword? He you all call. Upon hearing this, the villagers settled down. The person who had attacked Viker fell silent, saying, "If Chihuahua says so, we should stop." Another added, "If Chihuahua were the vice consul, it would be better. How would such a kid enforce the law?" Viker, listening from above, paused for a moment before gripping his staff tightly. He raised it high, leaving everyone in astonishment. He then forcefully jabbed the staff into the ground, causing the surrounding earth to tremble and creating deep cracks that sent rocks and dirt flying everywhere. The onlookers were left speechless by the power of the new consul. Both Chihuahua and the two bodyguards were equally astonished. Viker let go of the staff and stepped back, announcing, "With my authority as consul, I hereby declare a new special law." He looked up, his face set with seriousness, and declared special law of the Butcher family, Clause 1. Anyone who can pull this stake out will receive 100 million gold. Upon hearing this, Chihuahua was stunned, and everyone present widened their eyes in disbelief. They shouted in surprise, "Wow, what did he say?" Everyone glanced at the staff while quietly calculating 100 million gold. The first clause of the special law of the Butcher family states that whoever pulls this stake out will instantly receive 100 million gold as stipulated by Butcher van Baskerville, the consul. This law stirred murmurs among the crowd, filled with skepticism. 100 million? That's the equivalent of 4 years of hard work for someone. Who would just give away 100 million to someone who can pull out Chihuahua? And the aftermath of his situation left everyone stunned. Viker didn't notice any movement and asked, "Is no one here? Is there nobody willing to take the money?" After a few seconds of silence, he continued, "Well then, I have no other choice." Immediately, the substitute clause by Butcher was announced. Whoever can pull this stake will instantly receive 1 billion gold as stipulated by Butcher van Baskerville, the deputy consul. Seeing that everyone still seemed hesitant, Viker spoke up again. "Whoever can pull it out will receive 1 billion. Still no one?" Suddenly, an elderly villager spoke up with a laugh that surprised him. The old man said, "What a joke. Are you making fun of us?" Immediately, those present began to echo the old man's objections to Viker's proposal. "That's right. Stop making a fool of us and just go home to sleep. It's 1 billion, not chicken feed." At that moment, Viker simply looked at everyone and fell silent. The people's anger was weighing heavily on Chihuahua. He whispered, "Why is it us who should feel embarrassed?" Suddenly, Viker responded, "So, you mean no one will step up?" Everyone was taken aback by his retort. Viker called out that according to Article 3 of the Butcher Special Rules, whoever pulls this stick out will immediately receive 10 billion gold coins as stated by Butcher van Baskerville, the deputy consul. At that moment, Viker seriously said, "Whoever can pull it out will be rewarded 10 billion. The silence from the crowd made him uncomfortable, prompting him to threaten still no one. The tension made the villagers below tremble. They stammered, "What's going on? Is he really serious?" People started to reconsider their choices. "Should I try it?" One pondered. Some hesitated and advised against it, saying, "Are you crazy? Who knows what might happen to you?" They shifted their attention to the sword hanging at his side, debating. "Look at the sword on his hip. What if he punishes you for being greedy?" The chatter grew louder. "That thing might be super heavy. Plus, it seems a bit tilted compared to earlier. I'm sure he has something else in mind. It's best not to go." Viker was feeling discouraged and intended to raise the amount of money once again. He said, "So, it seems like there's still no one." Chihuahua, who was aware of Viker's plan, quickly stepped in to advise him quietly, "Consul, in this city, that amount of money." Suddenly, a small hand shot up. It belonged to a little girl selling flowers known as Judy. Boldly, she said, "Can I give it a try?" An old man recognized her and rushed to ask, "Hey kid, are you Judy, the flower girl? Do you really think this is the right place for that?" Judy firmly replied, "My mom is sick, so I have to do something." The old man shot back, "You're too naive. You'll get hurt if you step up in situations like this." But Judy didn't show any fear. With a cheerful smile, she answered honestly, "If that happens, please take care of my mom for me." Hearing that, the old man was... The little girl stood in front of the stick firmly planted in the ground. Inside, fear surged within her. She began to think, will he really kill me? I'll become the laughingstock for everyone. Surely, he'll at least give me a few coins, right? Judy looked up, continuing to think, I hope I can get the most from this basket of flowers. Seeing the girl hesitate, Viker pointed at the stick and said, "Give it a try and pull it up." Judy followed his instruction. She sat down, grabbed the stick, and pulled it with all her strength. Contrary to her expectations, the stick easily lifted, surprising Judy. The onlookers widened their eyes in unison, astonished, thinking she did it. The little one really did it. Judy nervously looked up, still holding the stick in her hands. She quietly wondered, why was it so easy to pull? It can't be true. At that moment, Viker, with a menacing look in his eyes, reached for the hilt of his sword, causing Judy to gasp silently. She shut her eyes tightly, thinking in fear. This is it. I'm going to be... In the dark of night, with her eyes closed, Judy thought to herself, is this the reason people oppose the nobles? A sin that can't be forgiven? Or am I just being too greedy? If I die, who will take care of my mom? Mom, I'm sorry. But then, Viker presented a bag of money in front of the trembling girl. He said, here, let's start with 100 million gold. Judy opened her eyes, surprised by what was in front of her. She took the bag of money and responded with a soft yes. The villagers below were all left speechless. Viker kindly asked her, where do you live? 10 billion gold will be heavy, so I'll arrange to have it delivered to your home. He also mentioned that he would send guards to escort her home with a reward. Then Viker turned to Chihuahua and snapped his fingers to give a command. He gently ruffled Judy's hair in a warm gesture. Viker cheerfully said, this is the law. Laws must be followed. Chihuahua's eyes went wide and he was left speechless. Meanwhile, the villagers watching from below were in shock, thinking, that's a bag full of gold coins, something so hard to... The following example served as an opportunity for the Bitcher family's special law to gain more recognition than the Baskerville family's order. If someone breaks the law, they face punishment. But if they comply, they are rewarded. This straightforward approach resonated with the people. Gradually, every city under Underdog grew friendlier and trusted Viker. The deputy consul became a topic of local conversation. Have you heard about the deputy consul? He's really different. Another would add, I've heard that Deputy Consul Bitcher always carries a sword with him. That's the social norm. Since the Bitcher special law was enacted, criminal activities have significantly decreased, with crime rates howling in the consulate's central area. A large sign was installed in the office engraved with the names of the consulate staff. Chihuahua wiped his forehead in relief after finishing the sign. Viker, sitting at his desk, praised him, saying that's a true mark of Eastern culture. You really did a fantastic job. Chihuahua turned his head and replied, I don't consider this a trivial task. In my 20 years of work, I've never gotten the chance to take part in it. Viker replied, we can't get angry at those who don't trust us and look down on the law. I'm trying to figure out how to attract attention and make a strong impression. Chihuahua started crying out of emotion. He kept saying, I, Chihuahua, will follow you for the rest of my life. Now I realize that the hardships I faced after meeting you, a vice consul, weren't in vain. Viker felt a bit uneasy and reassured him, calm down. Then he began to reason, everything is a result of what Camus Moore did in her past life before she became the queen. The crime rates are nearly zero. Of course, it's because she forced politicians using violence, so she wasn't loved by everyone. Suddenly, Viker spontaneously laid out a map around the Underdog area. He smiled and said, the problem has begun. Since we've given away 10 billion gold, we need to think of a way to get it back, right? Without hesitation, Viker quickly picked up a pen and marked a 10 on the neighboring areas, saying, this is where illegal organizations usually hide. I will clean up and seize their dirty money. Chihuahua held a map in his hands, looking astonished as he asked, how did you know it was there? Viker pointed to his nose and replied, I can smell it. He thought to himself, of course I know, because that area is where I investigated and went crazy before I rewound time. The man listened half aware and couldn't help but wonder, just how much has he investigated? He always seems to know what's going on. Suddenly, the main door swung open and a guard rushed in calling out, Vice Consul. That made both Chihuahua and Viker turn to him as he continued, there's a request from the youth council of the municipality. Upon hearing this, Chihuahua, visibly anxious, exclaimed, just as I suspected. Viker chuckled and said, so those nobles who just like to boast in the council want to see me, huh? Chihuahua turned to him and explained, the Youth Autonomy Council includes members from the Hoffman, Peer, Windsor, Morgan, Farragher, Rothschild, and Prada families. They are second and third generation descendants of the native families from the Baskerville territory. Although it's called the Youth Autonomy Council, it's actually a social organization. It seems the young gentlemen have something to say about the Viker special law. Hearing this, Viker quietly scoffed. He said, so the flies are starting to smell the dung, huh? His words made both Chihuahua and his bodyguard jump in surprise. Viker smirked as he intertwined his fingers thoughtfully and spoke with amusement. Then it's time to get rid of the pests that are gnawing at the dignity of the city. In the luxurious Underdog City Hotel Club, there's no shortage of extravagance. Deep within the club, there's a VIP room that costs 10 million gold for 6 hours. A party is being held there, attended by 7 key members of the town's youth council. Pile high, the bottles of wine are being filled with red wine as someone shouts, let's build a tower. Bring everything you have over here, or go to the party all night long. They are the esteemed heirs of 7 local families in this Baskerville territory. A man in a sharp suit, distinguished by his golden hair, is raising a bottle of wine in his hand, looking thoroughly delighted. The people below are joining in with enthusiasm. With that, the pyramid named Don Quixote Perignon 666 has been completed. And each young man here is worth 10 million gold. The golden-haired man says to the server, you can drink whatever spills onto the table. The servers are ecstatic. One even sticks out his tongue to lick up the spilled liquid, exclaiming, oh my, thank you, sir. Because of you, we get to taste this incredibly valuable drink. We will serve you with all our dedication. Calmly, the golden-haired man sits down, saying, no matter how I spend, my wealth won't diminish. Person next to him smiles ingratiatingly. All thanks to Baskerville, we get to live like this. Another man raises his wine glass and remarks, the slave trade is still thriving. Capturing those savages as slaves is going quite smoothly. It's all due to Baskerville's relentless focus on expanding the borders. And since there are no royal spies around here, it truly is a perfect playground. Even the clubbed here waste more than those in the The others hearing this smiled with delight and replied, not to mention the Baskerville clan is protecting us. How safe does that sound? Honestly, doesn't this just make the Baskervilles our hunting dogs? The blonde guy grinned with a devilish expression and said, Baskerville only takes out a bunch of reckless fools. Just look at what happened to Victor Hoffman. They didn't even realize they were set up by us. Baskerville personally wiped out the Victor Hoffman clan, the most loyal of the 8 clans. At that moment, a bloody massacre scene flashed vividly in the mansion of the Victor Hoffman family. The person sitting next to him cheerfully responded, thanks to that, there are now only 7 clans left. The blonde leaned back in his chair, responding calmly and casually, that's because they got in the way of our fun. By the way, you heard about the new vice consul. I asked someone in the audience, and it's clear he's an illegal obstacle. I think his name is Viker. Have you heard of him? The person next to him replied, no, it's the first time I'm hearing about him. The blonde guy continued, he's only 15. I've heard he threw a huge party as soon as he got here. What a real fool. I bet we'll get along just fine. Why don't we mess with him a little and assert our dominance? We'll throw a big party with the most expensive drinks and plenty of women. But when the party's over, we'll leave the bill for him to pay. The blonde said this with an excited gleam in his eyes. The others, hearing this, responded happily, sounds great. He went on, how much money can a 15-year-old bureaucrat possibly have? I bet he wouldn't even dare to send a report back to his family for fear of getting chewed out. Then we'll just say it was all a joke and pay the bill ourselves. He'll never go against us again. At this point, he suddenly flashed a mischievous, thrilled smile. Just then, the waiter came in, followed by 3 stunning girls, and announced, gentlemen, the ladies are here. They looked at the beautiful girls and couldn't help but chime in. You're still coming back after everything we've done. Get her out of here. She just ruins the vibe. Hey you. Suddenly, one of them noticed a young man who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Curious, the person asked the waiter, so, who is this guy? Did someone call for a male waiter? The waiter replied, isn't he someone you know? I have no idea who he is. Hearing that from the young aristocrat, the waiter put on an annoyed face and said to the young man, I wouldn't think anything strange of it since you walked in so boldly. Hey kid, do you think this is some kind of joke? However, the young man ignored the comments and confidently walked past them. His red eyes suddenly showed a coldness. Moments later, the actions of the young man left the aristocrats utterly stunned. One of the waiter's arms was twisted at such an angle that it looked deformed, causing him to scream in agony. One aristocrat, seeing this, felt a wave of unease and confusion wash over him and exclaimed, what the hell? The young man advanced toward them and coldly said, Bicker Van Baskerville is my name. The men seemed a bit taken aback upon hearing this. One of them replied, Bicker, you mean the vice consul? What are you doing here? Bicker calmly responded, you called for me. Suddenly, the blonde guy became polite. He feigned a smile and said, oh, vice consul, you were fast. I didn't expect you to arrive here so soon. Then he turned to whisper to the person next to him, should we train the new guy now? The person beside it replied, yeah, let him pay the bar tab. The blonde guy continued, we'll bring him over to join us. After the party ends, we'll make him settle the bill. Pitcher abruptly slammed his hand on the table and said, stop this nonsense right here. As he spoke, the glasses of wine on the table suddenly flew into the air and shattered into pieces. Wine then spilled from the fragments. The people sitting there couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock at this scene. The blonde guy was no exception. In fact, even when droplets of spilled wine landed on his face and clothes, he didn't mind and thought to himself, did he just destroy the champagne tower with mana resonance just by touching the table? Does that mean he's a genius? Powerful streams of mana still shimmered under Bitcher's palm as he placed his hand on the table. His eyes suddenly glowed a terrifying red. The young nobleman sitting next to him, irritated, turned to the blonde guy and said, damn it, I thought you said he was just a 15-year-old kid. The blonde guy was equally angry and gritted his teeth as he replied, you're a skilled intermediate swordsman, aren't you? Cue something. Be quiet. If I fight with him, I won't last even a second. As soon as he finished speaking, Bitcher suddenly stepped up and touched the nobleman's shoulder, saying coldly, "Hey, you." This caught the nobleman off guard, and he exclaimed in surprise. Then, feeling somewhat awkward, he responded, "I swear we'll pay for our drinks ourselves." Bitcher leaned in, threateningly glaring at the nobleman, and said, "Of course you should pay for the drinks you consumed. Do you expect me to clean up after you?" The young hare felt uneasy as he heard the man speak, a cold sweat trickling down his back. He thought to himself, "Damn it, I have accidentally given myself away." The others who witnessed this scene quickly chimed in to help ease the tension. Who would do something so despicable? We would never dare treat a member of the Baskerville family that way. We just wanted to verify your qualifications as vice consul. One of them explained, his golden hair making him look particularly anxious. "As you know, the city of Underdog is struggling right now. We need to know if you can resist temptation." Another man sitting nearby nodded in agreement. "Exactly. You truly deserve to lead us and we will follow you." Hearing this, Bitcher replied, "A master can examine his dogs whenever he wants." As soon as he said this, he swiftly attacked the young hare who had just spoken, causing him to double over in pain, blood pouring from his wounds. Bitcher remained cold and held tightly onto the stomach of the nobleman's son. However, the opposite isn't true. No matter the situation, a dog should never challenge its master. It seems you all have no idea what fear is, just because you have a little money and power, right? That's only because you've never truly experienced real fear. His actions made the beaten nobleman cry out in distress. With Bitcher's terrifying appearance and ruthless behavior, the others in the room couldn't help but gasp in shock, their faces showing clear signs of fear. After finishing his threat, Bitcher coldly removed his hand from the nobleman's son. Blood splattered from his hand as he let go. The nobleman hit the ground painfully, completely devoid of strength to resist. Then Bitcher stepped on the nobleman's face and turned to the others, saying, "Do you know why he ended up like this? If you still don't understand, then you deserve the same fate." The others began to sweat nervously, fear evident on their faces. One of them quickly replied, "I get it now. I think I understand why." Bitcher stepped on the young noble's face and asked, "Is that really true? If you know now, then you definitely need a good lesson." The young noble was terrified, blood pooling beneath him as tears streamed down his cheeks. However, Bitcher didn't pay any attention to that. He coldly stared with bloodshot eyes and decisively stomped down hard. Suddenly, blood splattered everywhere. The others watching grew furious and stood up, shouting curses at him. "You bastard, do you think you can escape because of this?" But before they could react, Bitcher swiftly closed in on them. He grinned maliciously, his eyes still red, and said, "See, you have no idea. Kidnapping and trafficking slaves illegally, disrespecting the Baskerville family. You've committed too many filthy acts. You can't tame a beast without teaching it a lesson first." This made the young noble's faces show clear signs of panic and fear. Not giving them a chance to act, Bitcher quickly attacked, and their screams filled the air. Now even his own face bore blood from the fight. With bloodshot eyes and a pleased smile, Bitcher declared, "It's time to punish these filthy creatures who don't know what fear is." In the dark dungeon, where prisoners were held lit only by flickering torches, two pairs of legs appeared, those of Bitcher and Chihuahua Baskerville. Chihuahua Baskerville looked around in surprise, sweating. A man's hand gripped the iron bars of his cell, and he shouted, "Hey, you dog, do you think you can escape like this? I'll tell my father. Just wait until I get out of here. I'll kill you. I'll never forgive you. Let me out now." That statement came from the blonde guy who had been beaten up badly. He had lost a few teeth, and his whole body was a mess. Because he was in pain, he couldn't express himself clearly. Chihuahua Baskerville, seeing the blonde guy in such a state, couldn't help but say, "Oh my, what were you thinking? How did it come to this?" Bitcher asked, "Do you think I went a bit overboard?" Chihuahua Baskerville quickly replied, "Of course you did. You should take it easy. Just look at what you've done to those guys. You turned them into a pile of meat." However, Bitcher wasn't flustered at all and calmly said, "Don't panic. I haven't even lifted a finger yet." This left Chihuahua Baskerville a bit confused, and he asked, "What do you mean?" Bitcher calmly walked away, then replied, "Those mayors wanted to stop corruption in certain areas and improve life there. But now they're tarnished to the point that they're eyeing the power of the Baskerville family. Just look at how they're fighting among themselves. It shows they still haven't learned their lesson. At sunset, I will personally execute all of these scum. I will also eliminate anyone related to them." As he spoke, he approached the blonde who was imprisoned, displaying a face full of resentment and anger. Chihuahua Baskerville responded in panic. "You're not joking, are you?" Bitcher replied with a completely indifferent demeanor. "Of course." The young nobles, locked up in the dungeon, their faces battered and swollen, kept approaching the barred door, crying and pleading, "I'm sorry, please spare me. I'll give you everything I have. Please don't kill me." Chihuahua Baskerville stood watching the scene, seeing many hands reaching out, pleading for forgiveness. Feeling a bit uneasy, questioned, will the families behind this just sit back and watch? They may often be cowardly and cautious, but if necessary, they can be quite bold. They won't support the businesses and you that they are controlling anymore, and they'll seek revenge one way or another. However, Viker seemed unafraid. He waved away the outstretched hands of the crowd, smiled back at Chihuahua Baskerville, and replied, "Don't worry, their families won't be able to complain. All these people are connected to low-level criminal organizations in the city's underground." Chihuahua Baskerville asked, "But do we have any evidence, sir?" He responded, "We have our ways. Don't be too concerned." At this response, Chihuahua Baskerville felt even. Following Bicker's train of thought, if there's no evidence to be found, we might as well create it. After all, I don't really care much about the consequences. Soon enough, the era of chaos will arrive. I will prepare for the battles in the near future. Even if that's not the case, I will still get into the academy and continue to survive. Then he spoke up, his expression cold. "I will tell you the crimes of your group, kidnapping and illegal trafficking of women. On top of that, you are involved in bribery, intimidation, committing crimes, and even attacking and assassinating officials." The blonde guy, hearing this, panicked. He gripped the bars of the cell tightly and said, "I didn't do any of those things. If you can provide evidence, I will accept the punishment." Vi, hearing this, turned around and asked, "You would accept the punishment if there's evidence? You're speaking as if you've committed a crime, but are just saying there's no proof of it." As he spoke, he grinned in a strange way. His eyes suddenly shone, filled with menace, making the blonde guy tremble. Then he lowered his head, not daring to meet Bicker's gaze, and said, "About that thing." Seeing that he didn't offer any further explanation, Bicker thought to himself, it seems he doesn't want to tarnish his family's reputation, even if it means facing death. Suddenly, a thin, frail figure entered, calling out, "Deputy Consul." Bicker turned to look at the person and smiled, saying, "You finally arrived." Chihuahua Baskerville, confused, looked back with a puzzled expression. "Huh?" The man Bicker was speaking with held a large package in his hands, stained with blood. Sharp weapons were protruding from the outside of the package. Though the man was skinny and covered in a variety of wounds, he smiled and said, "I completed the task you assigned me, sir." Bicker responded right on cue, "Well done." Pleased with the praise, the thin man chuckled joyfully and rubbed his bald head. Then, Butcher took out his horrifying torture tools from the bag. Each item was old and stained with blood. The man spoke respectfully. "I've been torturing for 30 years, but this is the first time I've seen such intriguing toys. How could you come up with such interesting tools?" Bitcher calmly held a sharp torture instrument and replied, "I didn't invent it. These things are quite common where I used to be." The man asked further, "Were you in hell or a place like that?" Bitcher looked at him and answered, "Something like that. Would you like me to teach you some fun tricks?" Upon hearing this, the thin man quickly averted his gaze and said, "No thanks. The way you handle those tools makes me feel nauseous." Bitcher looked at the blood-stained torture tools and thought to himself, "It's quite nostalgic with these instruments. Even political prisoners will have to spill their military secrets in this era of destruction. The techniques of torture are evolving in the face of demons." Then he took off his outer jacket and said, "Now then." Before he could finish his sentence, the blonde guy in the cell became extremely anxious and shouted, "Oh my God!" Seeing their bewildered and frightened expressions, Butcher said, "What do you think will happen if you all keep quiet? Please don't say anything, as it will give you time to reminisce about the old days." At that point, he suddenly smiled in a chilling manner. His bloodshot eyes added to his devilish appearance. The blonde guy was so terrified that he couldn't utter a word, only able to weep pitifully in despair. The rumors spread quickly that the 7 scoundrels living in wealth and crime had been caught. That was the only topic those groups in the city of Underdog could discuss. At a restaurant somewhere, people were engaged in lively conversation about this matter. With the temperament of the deputy consul, I don't think they will be able to get out on bail anytime soon. However, there was a contrasting opinion. They are children of powerful families. I think at most they'll just face some humiliation for a few days before being released. Someone else chimed in, but according to the law, the punishment for their crimes is supposed to be the death penalty. The other person replied, "There's no way he would execute the children of those 7 major families. You fool, don't you know what the new deputy consul is really like? He spent 10 billion just to pull some stakes out of the ground." Even though he heard this, the silver-haired man stubbornly disagreed. "Still, the consequences of killing those people are too great to predict. I bet it won't go as far as execution." A whole city was in debate. This is a power game between the new politician and the local families. Everything will only end when these local families bow down to him. As the people expected, the Hoffman, Peer, Windsor, Morgan, Farragher, Rothschild, and even the Prada family sent several small gifts to apologize to the new deputy consul. Local tycoons decided to provide an enormous amount of gold, saying those worthless individuals would be released on bail and would only face some scolding from their families, the heads of their clans. Or at least, somewhere, the golden hair had been completely cut off, leaving only a few strands. The eyes seemed to be destroyed, hidden beneath a white cloth. But it wasn't just the cloth. When he turned around, all that was visible was blood, a dampness so filthy that flies buzzed around him. Then in a town square, 7 heads were displayed on a table. The heads belonged to 7 young heirs from wealthy families. Next to this table fluttered a long paper notification carried by the wind. The heads were preserved in salt, twisted into expressions of agony. It was clear how much they had suffered before meeting their end. The notifications hung on the heads detailed the charges that led to their death sentences. It clearly displays the laws of the Baskerville family. Rule 10, Section I, prohibits illegal adult entertainment. The punishment is a tattoo on the face with the word pervert. The Baskerville family law, Rule 10, Section I, also forbids illegal gambling. The punishment is the amputation of hands, with offenders losing both hands for each violation. They can face a total of 72 amputations over time. According to the Baskerville family law, Rule 10, Section I, charging excessive interest is illegal. The punishment is a tattoo on the face based on the damages suffered by victims. The highest level of damage determines the penalty. Rule 20, Section I, prohibits lobbying. The punishment is exile. Since the criminals no longer show any signs of life, their bodies, except for the head, have been expelled from the city walls. Everyone who read these laws felt a mix of shock and fear. In the office, Viker spoke up. There's no denying that these laws are established, but in reality, the criminals are the local aristocrats with a reputation. So the laws need a little adjustment. Once we've issued this declaration of war, they will definitely start planning. Once this battle begins, it will only end when one side is wiped out. This city of Underdog will turn into a bloodbath. You better brace yourself, Manager Chihuahua. You'll be part of the next plan. As he spoke, he turned to look at Chihuahua Baskerville. The man seemed confused and pointed to his own face. As he thought, he looked at the cage holding the prisoner behind him. Everyone around wore luxurious, extravagant clothing. Groups of people lined up to enter a large tent. The slaves were chained at their wrists, their bodies covered in countless wounds. In contrast, the wealthy nobles, dressed in elegant attire, moved gracefully along the path. Those individuals also wore masks and brought a child along with them. Inside the cage for the slaves, Viker sat calmly with a smile. His eyes glowed red in the dark prison. His hands were shackled, and his clothes were tattered and worn as he played the role. It turned out that Viker and the Chihuahua's handler were standing outside the city of Underdog. The tent was set up outside the city walls. As dusk fell, several large torches were lit around the area. Nobles could come from either the city or distant places outside it, so we could see many impressive carriages arriving. These were high-end carts owned by members of the nobility. They gathered here because today was the slave auction. Normally, this was a secret auction that the Baskerville family did not participate in. That was why Vi and the Chihuahua's handler had to disguise themselves to blend in. The slaves being exchanged could include captured wildlings. Nobles and even ordinary citizens could be sold off illegally. Another special and strange point was that everyone at the auction wore masks. Perhaps they wanted to hide their identities in case they were discovered. Even the host wore a clown mask. He also controlled the entrance for the event. He stood at the door, enthusiastically shouting, "Welcome everyone. We are thrilled to have our esteemed guests here at the circus." The manager, Chihuahua, and Viker stepped forward. He handed the business card to the masked man. The man took it, read it, and exclaimed, "Oh, you're from the Morgan family, right? His signature and lovely handwriting here represent only the Morgan family. Your certificate suggests you have something to sell here." Manager Chihuahua stammered, "That's right, we're here to sell." And that item was Viker sitting in the wooden cage. The masked man, intrigued, wanted to see what the item was like. "The Morgan family has always been a valuable customer, providing me with many slaves. I'm only asking in case you were disappointed with your last purchase." Manager Chihuahua replied awkwardly, "Not at all. We are always satisfied with the slaves here." Then the jester in the mask leaned forward to peek into the wooden cage. Seeing Viker sitting there, he had to exclaim, "You've brought a rare item. I assure you it will fetch a good price. I hope you have a wonderful time at the circus, Mr. Chihuahua Morgan." The night was getting late. The atmosphere outside the city walls was incredibly peaceful. Inside the theater, however, it was a completely different story. A large number of nobles were seated around, intently watching the masked host in the center, who was passionately speaking. "I've heard about the trend of showcasing strange slaves. I'm not interested in this trend. Slaves need to be beautiful. Haha, I really enjoy the historical slaves from Greem. I remember the best one was bought by a noble. I found a great item here. All right, the first item is a knight caught by the Baskerville family. This is a level of monstrosity, rumored to have 19 hearts. Its name is Murcielago. As the host finished speaking, the massive corpse of the beast was brought out. It was a hell bull, also known as Murcielago. Its danger level is A, and it stands about 10 feet tall. You can easily find them in the Liru Eleno Mountains. At the second peak, there's a type of bull that lives deep in hell. It's rumored to have 19 hearts and will relentlessly pursue its prey until dead. The host continued to promote the first item, saying every bit of flesh, bone, and organ is valuable. Now it's time to auction this off. The opening bid is 100 million gold. The bidding climbed 100 million, 140 million, 200 million, 250 million. Even though the price for a quartz reached several hundred million, many people were still willing to spend the money. Once no one raised the bid higher, the auctioneer knocked down the gavel to finalize the price. We have 200 million and 50 million. Is there anyone willing to bid higher? Ultimately, it sold for 250 million. However, not every item commands such sky-high prices. Some start with very high opening bids, but if no one bids more, the seller has to lower the price. From 200 million down to 100 million, then down to 60 million until someone finally buys. Next, the auctioneer introduced a new item, but while he was speaking, he suddenly froze. Well, everyone, the next item is... An assistant rushed over to whisper something in his ear, making the auctioneer look flustered. Is this item also for sale? I'll do my best to sell it, but don't expect... The auctioneer, along with the host, turned his gaze back to the audience and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, a special item has come up for bidding. Brought by slave traders deep from the dense jungle from a warring tribe in the Liru Eleno Mountains, presenting a barbarian Balak. This wild woman seems to have long ears and tangled hair. Her whole body is scratched and filthy, wearing a tattered fringed dress. Her limbs are bent from the shackles, and a chunk of wood is stuck in her mouth. Her face and eyes are always full of anger, growling incessantly." The auctioneer continued to promote the wild woman, saying, "Isn't it intriguing to train a slave who won't listen? This is a chance for everyone to showcase their training skills." He sighed at the aggressive figure before him, thinking, why are they trying to sell this? Finally, he decided to start the bidding at a very low price. "All right, our starting bid is 5 million. It was an incredibly low price, but the audience remained silent. He had to lower the price. No one? Then we will reduce the starting bid to 3 million. The atmosphere remained silent, leaving him feeling awkward. He lowered his bid to just 1 million, but he couldn't manipulate the emotions of the aristocrats. Some were yawning and started chatting casually, clearly losing interest in the auction. Realizing the situation was ultimately hopeless, the auctioneer whispered and gestured to the bodyguard, signaling that they needed to take the item away. "It's over. This item isn't going to sell. I've told you we should only bring things here that can actually be sold. Let's discard it and use it as bait for next time." Suddenly, the female savage screamed loudly, her voice piercing the air. The hooded bodyguard immediately rushed over and delivered a violent punch to her stomach. The blow was so forceful that she coughed up blood and lost consciousness. With that, the bodyguard hoisted her over his shoulder and carried her out. After the incident, the auctioneer chuckled nervously and continued the program, saying, "Ha ha, it seems we had a slight disturbance. To show our sincerity, we'll now start the bidding for today's best item." It turns out the amazing item he was talking about is Viker. As soon as he stepped out, he caught the attention of a classy lady. Maybe it was his handsome face and muscular body, every muscle defined, that drew her in. The host excitedly introduced this item. "This is a special catch with black hair and red eyes. Clearly, it doesn't need much training. The quality is outstanding. I can't wait for this." Just as he finished speaking, the elegant lady immediately raised her bidding paddle, 600 million. Seeing the high bid, the host was thrilled and cheerfully said, "Ha ha, we haven't even started and we already have a bid of 600 million. But that number wasn't the highest. Shortly after, another man shouted a bid even higher, 800 million. The lady who bid 600 million felt that this delicious item was slipping away and angrily shouted, "What? But you're a man." The other man didn't hesitate to respond loudly, "What does being a man have to do with 800 million? The lady bluntly asked, "What can a man do with him? Are you suggesting you have other intentions for him?" Putting that aside, the man refused to back down. He continued, "It's none of your business. I intend to use him as a warrior slave." While the two of them argued and debated over who would take Viker, another man shouted a bid higher than 900 million. But none of that could compare to the guest number 99. This guest suddenly announced a staggering 6 billion, leaving the host momentarily speechless. After a moment, he shouted, "We have 6 billion. Is there anyone else who wants to bid?" A nearby guest looked up at the person who had just placed the bid and recognized him immediately as Baron Gambino from the Granary territory. 6 billion for a single bid. What a waste, the guest thought to himself. I've heard he has defeated all the underground forces and quickly expanded his influence. His finances aren't no joke. Next to Baron Gambino stood a female manager. When she saw her boss bidding so high, she interjected, "My lord Baron, it doesn't seem wise to spend like this. It's a bit too much." However, the Baron had already planned for his future. He replied, "For such a beautiful slave, it would still be a good deal if I sell them in the capital. I will make a large profit if I sell." Yet the female manager continued, "Even so, I feel that 6 billion is a bit too much, and it's not like we have to sell him first." At that moment, he really lost his temper and shouted at her, "How dare she, a mere assistant, speak back like that? Shut up, Cinda Wendy. I took you in when you had nowhere else to go. How dare you talk back to your boss?" Down below, when it became clear that no one could outbid the Count's 6 billion, the host called out loudly, "If there are no other bids, this item will be sold to guest number 99. Bitcher was led to the Count's seat. He let out a sound of surprise and thought, "Now that I look closely, it's not as bad as I thought." Then he turned to Butcher and said, "Now you belong to me. I'm not a bad guy, don't worry." Not only that, the Count even put on a twisted smile and added, "I'm thinking of so many ways to have fun with you. I can't wait." Suddenly, Butcher said nothing, raising his cupped hands in front of the Count. The Count looked confused and asked, "Are you asking me to take those cups off?" But Butcher was far from weak. He pulled the chain taut and yanked it apart, breaking it into several pieces, much to the astonishment of the female manager. Meanwhile, Butcher casually remarked, "No, there's no need for that. Is this a game? Sounds fun." Then he stepped forward and stomped down hard, shaking the ground and sending a hefty Baron tumbling. He fell flat on his stomach, and before he could get back up, Butcher was right beside him. Butcher bent down, grasped the Baron's neck, and coldly said, "How about this game? The theme is spear and shield. I'll be the spear and you'll be the shield. If you can survive, you win." Butcher's gaze and expression grew increasingly menacing, and his grip tightened, making the overweight Baron wince in pain, tears streaming down his face. He quickly called out to the manager, "Sin, hurry, call the guards, I'm going to die." In the end, he couldn't escape Butcher's grip, who held him tight until blood began to spill. The Baron fainted, his eyes rolling back and froth forming in his mouth. Butcher exclaimed with excitement, "Baron Gambino, you're out cold. I guess I win this round." With that, Butcher slowly removed his weight, leaving the female manager stunned as she uttered, "You're Butcher Van Baskerville." Butcher grinned mischievously and asked, "Oh, wait, has he kicked the bucket yet?" As the guests below heard the mention of the Baskerville family, chatter started to swell. "Oh, if it's Butcher, isn't he the vice consul of this city? What is the Baskerville Hound doing here?" The Chihuahua manager began to sweat, thinking to himself, "Vice consul, you've really stirred up trouble now." All the guests shifted their gaze to Butcher, and even the stage lights now shone directly on him. With an air of authority, Butcher announced, "A circus, huh? That's quite a fitting name for tonight. Everyone here shouldn't assume they can leave safely." Looking into his deathly serious eyes and seeing his sinister smile, it was clear that things weren't going to end well for those present. Butcher stood still, gripping his hands tightly and smiling gently. The host noticed this and couldn't hide his anxious expression. Just a moment later, he ordered his muscle-bound henchman in the circus to charge. Who cares if he's the vice consul? He's not unarmed, kill him. The 3 henchmen, all covered in scars and brimming with muscle, rushed forward, jumping simultaneously to attack Butcher. However, he didn't show the slightest bit of fear and remained perfectly still. His hands suddenly transformed. Powerful energy radiated around him, and a sharp weapon appeared. With just his hands, he quickly and decisively took down all 3 henchmen. The host was left stunned and thought, that blazing red aura, no way. At that moment, Butcher continued to fight, using his fists to counter a massive masked man wielding a spiked mace. Facing the impending attack of the weapon, Butcher showed no fear. In fact, he even smiled with delight. This reaction puzzled the masked man. In the next moment, with just one arm, he sliced through both the flail and the muscular man. Blood splattered everywhere. As he fought, the host thought to himself, a prodigy? Even if he's a Baskerville, how can he be considered a prodigy at this age? A prodigy represents the strength of a nation. At this rate, we're going to lose. The host was incredibly worried, gritting his teeth as he calculated. Suddenly, the Chihuahua Baskerville spoke up. Who expected the vice consul's real sword to be this terrifying? With that, he turned to the side, his face showing a hint of astonishment. While Butcher was focused on battling the henchman, a loud voice interrupted, "Look here, vice consul. Put down your weapon and surrender if you don't want your teammates to die." The host was now threatening to press his sharp blade against Chihuahua Baskerville's neck, making him cry out. Butcher stood calmly, watching him. Seeing he wasn't moving, the host spoke again. "Hurry up, can't you hear what I'm saying?" The sharp dagger was pressed closer to Chihuahua Baskerville's neck. However, he showed no fear and said, "Consul, I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me." Upon hearing this, the host shouted angrily, "Old dog, what are you doing? Stop squirming." The dagger was now so close to his neck that blood was starting to flow, yet he managed to speak. "Things like injustice and compromise are not in my vocabulary. I'd rather die than harm my master." Looking at his expression, the host responded, "Your words and your face don't match at all." At that moment, Butcher suddenly laughed heartily. "Chihuahua's office manager, I appreciate your loyalty. Don't worry, when I left the Baskerville territory, I received a gift from the patriarch." On Butcher's calf was a white flute. His feet were stained with dirt from fighting. Seeing this, the host felt confused and asked, "A flute? What are you planning to do with that?" Chihuahua Baskerville noticed the object Butcher was holding and thought to himself that it was just a whistle. He immediately took the flute and started to blow into it. He tried with all his might to create louder sounds. The noise affected everyone around, making them cover their ears and shout in discomfort. Even Chihuahua Baskerville and the host stood frozen in place. After a while, Butcher finally stopped blowing. Lying around him were the defeated henchmen of the circus. They were beaten and blood stained the ground. Once the noise ceased, Butcher focused intently on the two people in front of him. The host, still puzzled, spoke up, "Is that all? What's going on? Was that whistle just for scare tactics?" Just as I thought, even the Chihuahua Baskerville looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening. While the host was speaking, a sharp weapon suddenly pierced his throat, catching him off guard. He managed to say, "Huh?" Just as he looked down, his head was severed from his body, and he slowly collapsed. Even in death, he couldn't grasp why he had died so quickly. The killer was a man in a tight-fitting outfit, his hood covering half his face. Seeing the host fall unexpectedly, Chihuahua Baskerville was shocked and exclaimed. The killer, however, calmly sheathed his sword, his expression cold and emotionless. Other henchmen witnessing this charged forward with weapons drawn, shouting, "What? Who are you?" The figure remained still despite their close proximity. With a swift and decisive motion, he struck, and the first henchman fell immediately. Others looked on in horror as blood splattered everywhere and a brutal scene of slaughter unfolded before them. Their faces showed pure fear. But Butcher felt nothing but joy. He smiled with delight. Then, not just one, but many others, similar to the one who had just killed the host, appeared. They approached and lined up neatly around the circus tent. Bright red blood covered the entire camp. They each had bright red eyes like Butcher's, appearing both cold and cruel. On their chests was an emblem of sharp teeth. The circus minions grew increasingly anxious at the sight. One of them spoke up, "Don't tell me they are." Another replied, "No way, right? Please say it's not true." Cindy Wendy, faced with this situation, thought to herself, "The teeth emblem on their chests. I heard about that. It's from the most ruthless knight army of the Empire. Known as the Destruction Machine, they were all graduators, the pimple army of the Baskerville clan." As she lost herself in thought, Cindy Wendy did not notice that someone had appeared right behind her, ready to draw their sword to finish her off. After looking back at Cindy, Wendy suddenly felt darkness envelop her. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably as she thought, "I can't die here." Suddenly, Butcher appeared, standing in front of her, and said, "Let this person live." This left Cindy Wendy in shock. At his words, the knights immediately stepped back and knelt, awaiting orders. He coldly announced, "Take care of the rest, but don't kill anyone who has fully surrendered. However, if they show any resistance, don't hold back." The knights swiftly vanished, responding, "Yes, my lord." After saving Cindy Wendy, Butcher recalled Hugo's earlier words, "I trust you won't act recklessly, my son." He then thought to himself, Hugo is very astute about military matters. Thankfully, I managed to secure Pimple without any issues. Now a bloody massacre erupted, filled with the cries of the nobles, "Save me!" But the knights paid no attention, relentlessly continuing their violent attack. A nobleman lay on the ground, clutching his head in fear, thinking to himself, "I'll just stay here for now. Once everything settles down, I'll look for a chance to escape." However, in the next moment, a knight appeared right in front of him. The nobleman, terrified, spoke up, "Hey, I'll wear handcuffs." The knight, with his bloodshot eyes, coldly replied, "We don't bring those." Well then, before the nobleman could finish his sentence, the knight swiftly swung his sword, chopping off both of his legs. The nobleman cried out in anguish, "My legs." The knight remarked, "Those about to be executed don't need legs." Boston Trottier stood beside him, puffing on a cigarette, and smiled as he said, "Nephew, how does it feel to wield a pipple? Satisfying." Butcher put on his coat and responded, "I'm quite satisfied." Boston Trottier lifted one side of his glasses, grinning as he said, "Just let me know if you need anything else." The tall, muscular man smoking a cigarette is none other than the commander of the Pimple team, Boston Terrier La Baskerville. His face bears several scars, and his eyes share a distinctive color similar to Butcher's. Boston Terrier silently thinks, so this is Viker. I understand now why Hugo is interested in this kid. He is far more decisive and ruthless than a typical 15-year-old. With that thought, he rubs Bicture's head and says, you should join the Pimple team. I'm sure I can guide you well. Bicture, looking somewhat uninterested, replies, I'll consider it. Then he turns to leave, adding, I have something urgent to take care of, so I must go. Boston Terrier feels a twinge of surprise, stroking his chin with delight as he thinks, he cares to refuse me, which makes me want him even more. Bicture senses that vibe and grumbles inwardly. He's so annoying. He continues walking, surrounded by large cages that once held slaves. As he walks, Bicture ponders, I'm sure the money is somewhere around here. Is this where the nobility hides their cash? He glances at the safe in front of him and says, everything will be taken to the town hall, and that will settle this year's taxes. Afterward, he glanced around and said, I feel bad because the Baskerville clan has provided funding, but that's not what's important right now. Standing in front of the covered cage, Viker pulled the cover down and said, we're here for a different reason. Suddenly, he felt something. It was the sound of someone trembling and calling out. It came from the wild man who had been auctioned off before. His body was covered in wounds, and in his pain, tears streamed down his face. Bicture sat down and looked at the wild man trapped in the cage. Then he spoke. It seemed she was punished for trying to escape from here. The more he looked at her wounded body, the angrier he became, grinding his teeth in frustration. Then Bicture pulled out a small bottle of red liquid from behind his back and said, you're lucky. I'm giving you this because I got it from the conference member. In the next moment, he poured the red liquid into her mouth. The figure of the Beastman suddenly changed. A red energy radiated outwards. After a moment, the Beastman opened his eyes wide and sat up immediately. His face was filled with panic as he backed away. Bicture asked, why so startled? At this point, the Beastman appeared a bit calmer, but he still did not understand what was happening. Seeming to grasp this, he spoke in a different language, which meant, go away. He then opened the cage door. The Beastman slowly stepped outside, his face still full of caution. Bicture pointed in a direction and said, run. Bicture couldn't help but think, maybe because I've fought many Beastmen in my past life, I can say a few words of their language. Suddenly, the Beastman spoke in an incomprehensible tongue. He quickly adjusted his earlier thought and said, oh, not very fluent. The Beastman then left. Before going, he said something to Bicture. Although he didn't understand, he could roughly guess. Well, I guess that was a thank you. All right. The scars were gradually taken off by him. After a while of searching, Bicture happily exclaimed, I found it. The body of Murcielago. Fortunately, they haven't decomposed it yet. So it turns out what you've been wanting all along is this. That large body was still placed on a long table, and the monstrous creature lay motionless. Immediately, a powerful energy radiated from his hand. It resembled a dark red lightning-like energy. In an instant, a sharp weapon appeared. He smiled and said, this is the first level of monster, Beelzebub. I'm going to let you feast, so calm down. The Pimple team will be here soon, so eat quickly. The sharp weapon in his hand seemed to understand, responding enthusiastically. The new deputy consulate swiftly dealt with the crime organization. By the end of the day, rumors began to spread that nobles were involved in illegal slave auction activities, and those who organized the events were sent to prison with their hands and feet cut off. On that day, the largest demon hideout in the city of Underdog was set ablaze along with its members, completely The hands of the VIP guests were displayed as a warning, serving as an example for any criminal actions. The 7 families, not seeing their children return, but complaints to the consulate, but the response was already prepared. Bicture coldly stated, for those criminals involved in the illegal slave trade, the death penalty is the only fitting outcome. The testimonies of the 7 criminals were recorded. Their accounts and statements about the assets were noted. The Baskerville family investigated the matter and would soon report back to the palace. Soon after, the objections from the 7 families ceased. The arrogant family heads had to go to the consulate and humbly beg the person who had killed their children. However, Bicker's answer was very straightforward. He stood tall in front of them and said, we have uncovered the hidden ledger in the Inferno. You have violated the Baskerville autonomy laws, so your assets will be confiscated. And to pay for your crime of treachery, all members within 3 degrees of your family will be executed. As he spoke, he looked at them with bright red eyes. The homeowners couldn't help but feel a sense of fear and confusion upon hearing that. Under the new deputy consul's rules, blood had continuously spilled on the execution floor for days. The blood of the parasites had been cleansed from the city. As a result, the city administration was always short-staffed, causing unemployment rates in Underdog to drop. The money collected from punishing illegal activities helped restore the city's welfare. The public support for Butcher among the Underdog residents was steadily increasing. Chihuahua Baskerville cheerfully spoke up, Deputy Consul, I brought you some coffee. Picture remained focused on his work and replied, "You should concentrate on managing the office. There's no need to bring me coffee." However, Chihuahua insisted, "This is my way of thanking you. You saved me from losing my head that day." He cheerfully replied, "A cup of coffee for a life. That seems a bit cheap, doesn't it?" Chihuahua responded, "Not at all. 2 sugar cubes, 2 spoons of cream, and just a dash of water. So, how's your writing practice going?" Pitcher said, "Can you?" The Chihuahua held up the paper he had just written on and said, "You've only just started learning to write, but you've already reached this level." Hearing Chihuahua's compliment, he replied, "I still have a long way to go to reach your level." Chihuahua thought to himself, he truly amazes others with the new highly effective laws he has created, using just a few things he learned back then. He understands how the law operates. If the Vice Consul continues to maintain this level of performance, perhaps the city of Underdog can develop even further. The night had completely enveloped the sky. The moonlight shone down, illuminating the space around. Through the window of the dimly lit room, the moonlight crept in. A hand bound in cuffs belonged to none other than Cindy Wendy. Picture stood in front of Cindy Wendy and said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't meet you sooner. I've been very busy during this time." She had introduced herself as Cindy Wendy Senjosa. With her eyes covered, Cindy Wendy didn't respond right away. Instead, she asked, "Why did you let me live?" He removed the blindfold from her eyes and replied, "It's simple. I have a few questions for you." Cindy Wendy, surprised by the sudden removal of her blindfold, grimaced and let out a few sounds of discomfort. She looked at him with a cold, hate-filled gaze and said, "Is that question what's keeping me alive?" Victor suddenly turned away and answered, "The reason Baron Gambino, who came from some filthy place, could gain power so quickly is because of you." At this question, Cindy Wendy fell silent, not saying a word. Seeing her reaction, he continued, "The investigation results show that you're very skilled at making money. If you channel that talent elsewhere, you could become a successful merchant or investor. I promise if you answer my question, I'll let you go. But if you refuse, you'll regret today for the rest of your life." He sat down in a chair directly across from Cindy Wendy, his voice calm but firm. Cindy Wendy clenched her teeth, clearly struggling with her decision. After a moment, she spoke through gritted teeth, "Fine, I'll tell you what I know." Victor, clearly pleased with her response, smiled warmly. "Good. So what do you think? Am I doing well so far?" Cindy Wendy let out a mocking laugh, her eyes narrowing. "I think you're doing an outstanding job right now." His smile faded slightly. "I will keep my promise if you keep playing games like that." Realizing she'd been caught, Cindy Wendy's expression hardened. She bit her lip in frustration before finally replying, "I think you're going in the wrong direction." Victor froze for a brief moment, surprised by her honesty. Then, to her shock, he broke into a wide, amused smile. "Interesting." Cindy Wendy Sen rose, looked up at the person standing in front of her. Suddenly, the man reached out his hand. Viker Van Baskerville leaned down and lifted her chin to get a closer look at her face. In a deep voice, he asked, "And the reason is..." His gaze was so intense that it made Cindy Wendy Sen Rose involuntarily shiver with fear. Then, unexpectedly, Viker released his grip, catching Cindy off guard. He turned away and calmly said, "Let's hear it. Tell me where I went wrong." Cindy Wendy gritted her teeth. Viker now sat down, listening to her story with interest. Cindy Wendy began, "Some time ago for a consul, one of the main reasons behind crucial decisions is etiquette." She seriously detailed everything, explaining how he created laws to handle crime while building his own reputation. Many people will suffer and even lose their lives because of those laws. In the long run, you will earn nothing but hatred and resentment from everyone. She analyzed thoroughly. Moreover, the Baskerville family won't welcome you if you hold more power than the patriarch and Underdog. In the end, you'll be despised by the people and seen as a threat by the Baskervilles. Viker calmly smirked and asked, "So what do you think I should do from now on?" Cindy Wendy looked directly at Viker and replied firmly, "You should return all the privileges you've gotten from the Baskerville family, including the honor you've received from this situation. You should give it back to the Patriarch. I suggest you either head to Liru, Eleno Mountain, or the Imperial Central Academy. Those are places where your age and background are more common, allowing you to hide your strength and identity. When the time comes, Patriarch Baskerville will take responsibility for you." Viker was silent, not responding. Then suddenly he emitted a powerful presence that startled Cindy Wendy. Viker spoke each word slowly, but with the weight of a mountain. "So you're saying you want the hunting dog to bite its master?" Viker's fierce energy was palpable, and he looked at her coldly. Yet Cindy Wendy stood her ground, meeting his gaze unwaveringly. "As a hunting dog, that's the only way for you to avoid conflict with the Patriarch." Viker scoffed, "I'll remember that." He then stood up and pulled out the handcuff key, his expression relaxing a bit. "That's a good piece of advice. It seems we share some thoughts." He inserted the key into the handcuffs to unlock Cindy Wendy. He followed through on his promise, saying, "You're free now." Cindy Wendy rubbed her wrists and asked warily, "Are you really letting me go?" Viker emphasized, "I'm a man of my word." She confidently walked toward the open door and replied, "Then I hope you never regret this decision." Suddenly, she paused when she heard Viker say, "Do you know about the family called Mesomanonaro? There used to be many powerful families, not just the 6 great ones in Underdog City. Among them was a strong merchant family, the 8th one, the Mesomanonaro family." Viker noticed that Cindy Wendy's fist had tightened. However, he continued, "This family disappeared after an unfortunate event." He went on to tell her about the youngest member of the Mesomanonaro family. On his birthday, he showcased some newly learned sword techniques. Many guests at the event were astonished. The demonstration began, and even the Baskerville family couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The brave boy showcased his sword skills. However, the swordsmanship he displayed was a secret technique of the Baskerville family, known only to its members. Details gradually unfolded as Viker recounted the story, and the news reached Patriarch Baskerville. They realized that a military secret had been exposed, prompting the Baskerville family to unleash their hunting dogs, leading to the destruction of the Mesomanonaro family. Viker revealed the cunning plot behind it all. The truth is, someone has been pulling the strings in this situation. The wicked members of the 7 great families stole the Baskerville sword techniques and allowed the youngest child of the Mesomanonaro family to learn them. Cindy Wendy awkwardly asked, "Is this about the 8th family? What does this story have to do with me?" Viker continued the story seriously. In reality, there was a survivor from the Mesomanonaro family after the massacre. Those 7 fools managed to sneak out a 1-year-old girl from the devastation. Cindy Wendy clenched her teeth tightly as she heard Viker continue, and because of the child's beauty, it had to endure torture and torment. The things they did are beyond description. It seemed like Cindy Wendy had reached her breaking point. She firmly turned her back and started to leave, saying, "I don't want to hear any more." Viker calmly laid out the truth. However, the story doesn't end there. Over time, a new deputy consul arrived in the city, and this deputy consul uncovered the issues and punished those responsible. The ones who caused all of this were 7 despicable men. Each word seemed to pierce Cindy Wendy's heart, leaving her frozen in place. The newly appointed deputy consul tortured those scoundrels and made them face the consequences of their crimes until they died. And that's when they spoke their last words. Her eyes filled with angry tears as she listened to the recounting, "I'm sorry for the terrible crimes I've committed," or something like that. Cindy Wendy yelled out in frustration, "Sorry to whom exactly?" Viker laid it all out, no longer holding back. To whom else? To the girl who used the fake name Cindy Wendy Senrose and the only survivor of the Mesomanonaro family. At this point, all of Cindy Wendy's emotions exploded, and she could no longer hold back. Cindy Wendy demanded angrily, "How can I trust you? You capture them, torture them. How am I supposed to believe their apologies are genuine?" Viker grabbed a torch from the wall and replied calmly, "Then how about trusting me?" Without waiting for her response, he led the way down a dim corridor. "I think it will be easier for you to see it for yourself," he added. When they reached a cell, Viker stopped and gestured toward the door. "Look inside," he said. The sight before her froze Cindy Wendy in place. The air was thick with the stench of blood, and lifeless bodies were scattered across the floor. The walls and ground were smeared with desperate messages written in blood. "We are responsible for the downfall of the Mesomanonaro family. Forgive us for our sins. I'm terrified. I don't want to die. I'm so scared." Her stomach churned. Overcome by horror, she covered her mouth with trembling hands, but the nausea hit her hard. She dropped to her knees, retching uncontrollably. Viker's voice remained cold and steady. "No matter how painfully they died, the Mesomanonaro family's vengeance is far from over." He turned toward her, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. "There's still one more family that needs to be dealt with." Once again, an overwhelming presence filled the air, and a suffocating aura of danger surrounded them. Viker voiced his plan for revenge. "It's the Baskerville family," Cindy Wendy said in Mesomanonaro. "You still have a lot to do." Cindy Wendy wiped her mouth and asked, "You're a member of the Baskerville family, so why are you helping me?" Viker didn't answer her question. Instead, a mocking expression crossed his face as he replied, "You asked the wrong question." Cindy Wendy pushed herself up and said, "I understand what you mean." Though her eyes were still red, she regained her composure and spoke seriously to Viker van Baskerville. "I will repay this debt." She turned to leave the prison cell, adding, "From now on, no matter what you do, I promise you won't ever have to worry about money again." Viker had achieved his goal and smiled with satisfaction. "I will definitely remember this promise." Outside, sunlight streamed into Viker's private room. Chihuahua Baskerville, the manager, cheerfully opened the door, waking Viker. "Vice Consul, the sun has risen." Before he could finish his sentence, the scene in the room left him completely stunned. It's time to get to work. Viker, still groggy, woke up. Blood was splattered everywhere, covering his clothes and the room. In a nonchalant tone, he greeted the manager. "Good morning." Chihuahua, panicking, asked, "What's with all these bodies?" Viker calmly replied, "I'm not sure. It seems like killed them while I was asleep." The manager, still shaken, asked for clarification. "Really?" Viker honestly responded, "Of course not. Just kidding." After changing his clothes, the two of them walked side by side. Chihuahua, looking worried, asked, "Was your childhood really that intense?" Viker, with a hint of emotion, replied, "What's wrong with that? Isn't it fun?" The manager still seemed uneasy, saying, "No, it's not about being fun or not." Viker stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Looks like there are a lot of things getting in my way." He began to list the attempts on his life. 2 poison arrows, 4 poisonings, acid attacks, snipers, a fire, getting hit by a car, and more. So much has happened. Despite the serious threats to his life, Viker appeared remarkably relaxed as he casually cleaned his ears, commenting, "Looks like I've really caught some attention." Chihuahua said seriously, "I think you might be losing it." In his mind, Viker thought to himself, the skill from that illegal auction. Endurance of Hellish Buffalo may be a bit risky, but it's better than I expected. The blood seal on Viker's hand held several skills. Slot 1, Burn Injury Cerberus, a plus. Slot 2, Endurance of Hellish Buffalo, A. Slot 3, Hamurish Hellbound, B+. Viker recalled the moment when the assassin froze in shock as his dagger shattered after striking Viker's body. Thanks to the rear sticks of protection and his enhanced endurance, even a graduator-level assassin couldn't pierce his skin. With a serious expression, Viker made a firm decision. But these nuisances are starting to become a real problem. I need to take care of them. The Chihuahua manager quickly nodded in agreement. A wise decision. Suddenly, Viker froze in place, startled by the sight of a horse-drawn carriage parked by the roadside. His gaze locked on the triangular flag flying from the carriage, bearing the emblem of a hound and 2 red swords crossed beneath it. Viker's eyes narrowed as he murmured, "That flag. Is the Baskerville family here?" Viker frowned and said, "Looks like they come from the main family." From the spacious carriage, a figure stepped out and opened the door. Chihuahua's eyes widened in shock. Immediately, he stood in a formal stance to greet the person, feeling an overwhelming surprise. That's the manager, he thought. Tense and barely daring to breathe, he stood beside Viker, who had his hands casually in his pockets. A man dressed in a light gray suit with a black bow tie stepped down from the carriage. He carried himself with dignity and respectfully bowed to Viker. "It's been a while, young master." Recognizing the familiar face, Viker greeted him warmly. "Butler, you look healthy." The butler approached Viker, smiling. "Do I really?" The butler continued in a calm, composed manner. "I believe you'll do well, even after leaving the estate." Viker humbly responded, "It's just luck," while Chihuahua, still tense, asked, "He is." The old man looked at the butler standing so imposing and admired him silently, thinking to himself, the head butler of the Barrymore family, the finest butler in the family, who has held this position for 4 generations. In a family like the Baskervilles, even the smallest mistake can lead to death. Head butler John Barrymore. The old man's eyes sparkled, shining bright as if he could see a halo. I'd never expected to meet him. Viker asked directly, "So your presence here means?" Before Viker could finish his sentence, the man quickly responded, "Yes, that's right." Butler John relayed the message to Viker. "The patriarch appreciates your work and has ordered you to return to the estate." He seemed very pleased. Both Viker and Chihuahua immediately thought of Hugo LeBasker's face. Viker questioned, "Pleased?" "Hugo." Meanwhile, Patriarch Hugo was seriously reading a newspaper article about Viker. The content praised him as the most respected figure on the Underdog residence. The article also included several titles: most trusted by merchants, the most trusted by farmers, the most respected by children, the most esteemed by scholars, and the most wanted by assassins. With the newspaper in hand, Hugo finished reading and praised the Baskerville family, calling them a bunch of muscle-headed fools. "We can finally shed that image," he said. Viker placed his hand on his chest, solemnly accepting Hugo's praise. "Well done, my son." He replied calmly on the outside, but inside, doubt still lingered. "I just did my job, father." Is that a happy face? Hugo clasped his hands together and in a formal tone addressed Viker. "That's right. Rewards and punishments must be given appropriately." Viker widened his eyes, secretly pleased when he heard Hugo say, "You will go to the academy this year." As expected, the image of the grand and prestigious Colossal Academy appeared in Viker's mind. It was where the upper class of the empire gathered to study, where the children of nobles and royalty were educated. For security, students were required to stay in the dormitories. This was his chance to grow stronger while staying out of Hugo's watchful eye. Hugo asked Viker for his opinion. "I plan to send some people with you, but I haven't decided who yet. Do you have any siblings you'd like to bring along? Without hesitation, Viker immediately responded, having already made up his mind. I'm close to highbrow, middlebrow, and lowbrow. I'll use them as sandbags. Hugo didn't argue and immediately agreed, saying, then we'll send that trio with you. Do you remember the plan from when you were 8? Viker quickly brought up the topic. You mean during the training with the Morg family? The plan was to let the Morg family borrow the ruby mine and use them to confront the barbarians. Hugo's expression was filled with a cunning yet profound look as he replied, that plan was successful. Viker asked, you mean, Hugo explained, the Morg family has proposed a raid. They're actually quite eager for it. Now Hugo revealed his main purpose for calling Viker here. So why don't you scout the territory before you start school? You should check how the laws you revised have turned out. It will be a good experience for you. Viker bowed his head in obedience. Yes, father. The manager, Chihuahua, saw Viker off at the gate, waving goodbye with tears in his eyes as he said farewell to Viker, the vice consul. Watching the entourage with Viker leading it, he said with a heavy heart, take care. I'll do my best while you're gone. Viker glanced back at him with a hint of regret, thinking to himself, I'll be saying goodbye to manager Chihuahua soon enough. Viker's entourage rode forward on horseback, the sound of hooves echoing in the air. Suddenly, Viker's expression changed. He spoke in a low voice, you can show yourselves now. Instantly, numerous hidden assassins, all dressed in black cloaks that covered their faces, revealed themselves and landed on the ground. Viker remained unfazed and coldly addressed them. I apologize for making you wait. I didn't want our farewell to turn chaotic. One man removed his hood and replied, it's no problem, young master. We will ensure your safety on the way to the Morg family estate. This man was the trainer of Pimple, Staffordshire, Baskerville. Viker calmly inquired, is Uncle Bostondertier doing well? Staffordshire replied steadily, the Count is fine. After the slave auction incident, he is very eager for you to join Team Pitbull. Viker thought to himself, he's such a bother. By the time they reached the meeting point, dusk had fallen. The area was surrounded by sharp, towering rock formations. Viker took in the scene and asked, is this the place we're lending to the Morg family? As Viker watched everyone diligently planting rice, he remarked, it seems like no one is breaking the rules. Staffordshire rode up behind him and reported the scouting team has already investigated the area, but Viker interrupted Staffordshire, saying, I know, that's the issue with the barbarians. Staffordshire continued, from what I've heard, the Morg clan has organized a team that includes 3 major clans, 30 members from smaller clans, and hundreds of mages from various unknown clans. Viker listened and commented, it looks like the Morg clan is taking this very seriously. In his mind, Viker assessed the situation. In other words, the Baskerville clan only sent a group of knights and me, a member of a smaller clan, while those from the upper class are on the other side of the mountain. He acknowledged that Hugo's orders made sense. As Hugo said, considering the lives of the barbarians wasn't a bad idea. As everyone moved forward, they came across a deadly field of sharp stakes rising from the ground, exuding a strong smell of death. On the stakes were countless human skeletons impaled and mangled beyond recognition. Staffordshire said to Viker, a mage did this. Viker speculated, this might be a message from the barbarians to the Morg family. Staffordshire agreed with Viker's thoughts, saying, that's a serious warning. Viker's mind wandered to Camus Moore. It makes me think of her. She must be really strong by now. Suddenly, 3 women appeared from above. They called out loudly, causing Viker and Staffordshire to look up. Who's there? The women showed no hesitation and boldly threatened them. In terms of appearance, they seemed like triplets. No one is allowed to pass without permission. No one. Viker seemed to recognize them. I know who they are. Their identities were revealed. The 3 flowers of the Morg family, Hysis, Middlesis, and Losis. Viker felt uneasy about the reputation of the trio before him, but maintained a calm demeanor as he spoke. One of them is crazy enough on her own. When they're together, the level of craziness reaches a whole new height. Viker politely explained why they were there. We are a team sent from the Baskerville family. We've come to survey the territory and maintain friendly relations. Please open the fortress gate. Unexpectedly, Hysis waved his hand dismissively and said, we're not reporting to the authorities just yet, so just wait. I'm sure we'll get an answer by tomorrow. Viker shifted to a threatening tone. Are you trying to block me from entering my own land? The trio remained arrogant, showing no signs of backing down. Oh, come on, are you looking down on us just because we're borrowing this place? Hysis shot back at Viker, making him sigh in frustration. Do you know about the tenant protection laws? That's your family's law. Viker, full of arrogance and indifference, replied, I'm going to change that law now so I can kick out any tenant I don't like. He lost all patience and said firmly, I'll say this one last time. The trio seemed to waver slightly, sensing Viker's intense energy and the sharpness in his gaze as he commanded, open the door. They immediately felt the weight of his authority. Their previously smug expressions turned pale and sweat began to bead on their foreheads from fear. Lausis gritted his teeth, his hands starting to gather magical energy, ready to challenge. I've heard there's a crazy kid running the Underdog city. She raised her voice and unleashed her attack. But we've faced plenty of crazies like you before. The powerful strike came straight down in front of the horse that Viker was riding, causing it to rear back in surprise and panic. With a proud gesture, she pointed directly at Viker and declared, "If I tell you to wait, you have to wait. How dare a foolish swordsman like you think otherwise? You cannot enter the lands of the Morgue family without permission. Or maybe you should show us what talent the Baskerville family has to offer." Staffordshire drew his sword and said to Viker, "I don't think we can settle this just by talking." Viker quickly agreed with Staffordshire's assessment. Suddenly from behind, three familiar voices echoed, catching Viker completely off guard. "You foolish girls don't know your place. Stupid, stupid." Viker turned toward the sound of the voices. That voice. The three Morgue sisters, who had been insulted, quickly erupted in anger, no longer caring to hold back. "You're just followers. Do you really think you're better than us? You don't even know your own position." The owners of those voices stepped forward together, blocking the way. They took off their hoods, revealing themselves to be the three Baskerville brothers, the spearheads of Patriarch Hugo the Baskerville. The three of them pointed at Viker with determination and said, "He is the symbol of Baskerville." The brothers wore expressions that suggested they were ready to handle everything, completely ignoring Viker, who was already overwhelmed. Viker's face twisted in frustration, his blood boiling. Inside, he helplessly thought, this is just getting more complicated. Viker looked at the enthusiastic trio, feeling a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Why are they acting like this? He wondered. Hybro seemed to sense Viker's thoughts and spoke up. "We are repaying the favor for recommending us to the Academy. Just leave this to us." Viker coldly thought, "So this is about the Academy? I was planning to use you as sandbags." In truth, Viker had some predictions about these three brothers. In the future, they will become ruthless soldiers. They may not be smart enough to make their own decisions, but they can still follow orders. With training, they could become very useful. Thinking it over, Viker decided to maintain a friendly relationship with the three Morgue brothers to gain their trust. With a bright smile, he said, "I'm counting on you guys." The three roses of the Morgue family huddled together, whispering among themselves, "Idiots. Total idiots." But the Morgue brothers weren't the type to stay quiet. Grinning mischievously, they raised their thumbs, each giving a playful jab back. "No, you're the idiots, 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 idiots." The three roses bristled at the mockery, their tempers flaring. "You little brats. We'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." Viker stood off to the side, calmly observing the scene. His mind wandered back to the time before he had rewound the timeline. The Morgue trio were well known for being skilled mages, each specializing in a different elemental magic: water, earth, and nature. Their magic abilities were as follows. High Sis wielded water magic. Middle Sis controlled earth magic. Lowbrow mastered nature magic. What made them especially dangerous was how their elements complemented each other perfectly, multiplying their combined magical power tenfold. From a tiny little sprout infused with their strength, a massive tree soon emerged powerfully from the ground. Witnessing their mutual support, Viker silently acknowledged their impressive abilities. That's why they were called the Three Flowers of the Morgue family. After finishing their spell, the three sisters laughed proudly and teased. "So, what do you think? Can't you guys from the Baskerville family get past this?" On the other side, Hybro scoffed and drew his sword, ready to attack. "They're just a bunch of trees. What can you do with them?" He boldly showcased the combat skills of the Baskerville family. His first move cleanly sliced through the thick roots in front of him. The swordplay was so perfect that Staffordshire couldn't help but compliment, "Wow, that first move was flawless." But suddenly, Hybro looked surprised. Thanks to his quick reflexes, he managed to block a tricky strike from the roots. He quickly jumped back to avoid it, causing his two siblings to shout in surprise, "Hybro!" The three roses stood confidently on the sturdy roots, continuing to taunt the Baskerville family. "There's no way your pathetic swords can reach us." The Baskerville brothers were filled with rage at that moment. Their eyes were bloodshot, as if they wanted to devour their opponents whole. On one side, a fierce battle was unfolding, while on the other, things were completely different. Staffordshire and Viker were deep in conversation. Staffordshire asked, "Isn't this interesting?" Viker, not quite grasping Staffordshire's point, replied, "What's interesting?" Staffordshire calmly explained, "It's about magic and swordsmanship. The debate over which is stronger has been going on for a long time. Magic uses the mana around us to mimic elemental power and amplify it many times over. In contrast, swordsmanship uses the mana within a person as energy to create explosive strength." They watched as the three Baskerville brothers fought against the three Morgue roses. Both sides were fiercely engaged. Neither was willing to back down, trading blows in a thrilling display. Staffordshire, witnessing this impressive spectacle, exclaimed, "The clan of mages and swordsmen will lead in the future. With their talent and potential, isn't it fascinating?" Viker replied nonchalantly, "I'm one of them." Staffordshire confidently asserted, "The young master has already surpassed them all." Viker lost his patience and thought to himself, "Why don't they just all die? This is such a waste of time. We need to get through here quickly. As the supervisor, I have a ton of work to do." Suddenly, a figure appeared looking annoyed and asking, "What's going on here?" Without bothering to find out the reason, the person unleashed fire magic, ready to take control of the situation. "What are you doing in my territory?" they demanded. At that moment, Hybero rushed toward Hysis, feeling triumphant as he said, "Got you." But unexpectedly, the fire magic user launched an attack, forcing Hybero to stop just in time. A swirling vortex of fire, incredibly powerful, was about to engulf both of them, causing Hybero to shout in panic. Then came the terrifying explosion as the fire vortex detonated. Those who didn't manage to escape in time would likely be reduced to ashes. Seeing such a powerful fire attack, Viker didn't worry at all. Instead, he felt a sense of relief, thinking, "Are they all dead yet?" To his surprise, Hybero and Middlebrow had narrowly avoided disaster, their hair slightly singed and frizzed. Breathing heavily, Hybero asked, "What was that? Where did that fire magic come from?" Still, he stubbornly yelled toward the three roses, "What are you doing? Are you trying to kill someone?" Little did they know they had also managed to dodge the attack just in time. Their hair was a mess, their clothes burned and tattered, and they were crying out, "I almost died. If you hadn't dodged, I would have been a goner. Oh no, I'm so scared." The person who ended the commotion spoke coldly, "What is all this?" Viker noticed right away, his expression shifting to one of amusement as he gazed at the figure standing atop the high wall. So it was Camus Moore, wielding that terrifying fire magic. Her voice was calm but stern as she reprimanded them. "I will not forgive anyone who causes disorder in the territory under my watch." The three sisters of the Red Roses hurried to explain themselves. "Camus, we were just trying to stop the intruders. They attacked first." Hearing their disrespectful tone, Camus shot them a sharp glare. "Camus, are you seriously addressing me that way, eldest sister?" Hysis immediately panicked and corrected herself. "Of course not, Commander." Camus pointed to a grim sight, a blurred-out image of something gruesome pinned to a stake, clearly meant as a warning. "You'd better be careful, unless you want to end up like that." It worked instantly. The three of them straightened up and became much more obedient. "I'm really sorry." Camus looked over at the Baskerville house. It seemed she recognized someone, her eyes widening in surprise. Viker was also staring directly at her. Unlike her earlier strong demeanor, Camus now appeared shy, brushing her hair back as she greeted Viker. "It's been a while, Viker Baskerville. 7 years, right?" Viker smiled, secretly thinking, has it really been that long? Camus Morg has grown up. She looks even more amazing now. Seeing Camus Morg in person truly opened Viker's eyes. This was the beauty of Camus Morg, the one who captured the hearts of countless wealthy men. Even some of Viker's followers were left speechless and captivated. Many men, even those who were married, found themselves drawn to her. There were whispers everywhere. Well, why hadn't anything happened in this lifetime? Before she could ponder further, Viker decided to focus on the main issue. "Well, never mind that. Open the door. This trio isn't listening to me." Seeing Viker's indifference, Camus got angry. "What? It's been so long since we last met, and that's all you have to say." Viker feigned innocence and asked directly, "What else should I say?" This only made Camus frown in frustration. "What do you mean?" Staffordshire stood beside Camus, watching him fume with anger. He thought to himself, is this a battle between the stars of two families after the trio's showdown? Camus pointed directly at Viker and bluntly declared 0 points. Frustrated, Viker tossed aside his earlier brave demeanor and responded, "What's with the attitude toward your future wife? Seriously, negative points for you." It's safe to say that everyone present was completely bewildered and silent. Neither the two families nor Viker and Staffordshire understood what was happening. Camus pouted, letting out a heavy sigh filled with rage, his face flushed red. Viker couldn't help but smile hearing the term wife for the first time in his life. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around them was still bustling with the busy work everyone was doing. At that moment, Camus and Viker were riding side by side, engaged in conversation. Camus spoke first. "It seems the Baskerville family doesn't know much about barbarians." Viker confidently replied, "Of course we do. We've been facing them for quite some time. We know more than you think." Camus sharply questioned, "Then why did you bring these idiots along? Are they all too young and stupid?" Viker responded bluntly, "We've already discussed this with the Morg family, and the main force will be on the other side of the mountain. Why are you asking when you already know this?" Camus grinned mischievously and replied, "I thought you didn't know." Viker coldly corrected her, "I'm the representative, of course I know." Still playful, Camus half-joked, "You seem like someone who's about to be abandoned by their family. But somehow, they still trust you, huh?" Seemingly in a good mood, Camus didn't stop there. "So what's the most annoying thing in the barbarian tribe?" Viker sighed quietly. She just kept asking. Yet, Viker patiently explained in detail. The warrior tribe, Black, and the sorcerer tribe, Rococo. The archery strength of Black is significantly higher than that of the Empire at certain levels, and the origin of this still isn't fully understood. Camus playfully scored him, saying, "Since you know so much about the barbarian tribe's culture, I'll give you an 8 firsts. Okay. Viker was a little disappointed and responded with frustration. "I answered well, so why are the points so low?" She waved her hand dismissively and said, "What should I do with someone as smart as you? I really dislike smart men. A man would be much more interesting if he were a bit dumb." Viker sighed, accepting Camus's playful grading of him. "Riding a horse 6 points? You're shorter than me, right? You're riding a horse way too big for you. Fashion, 4 points. Your clothes are not stylish, and that arrogance of yours, 1 point. I thought it was bad, but then Camus sincerely said, Your face gets 99 points. You grew up handsome, but your expression isn't great, so I'm deducting 1 point. Viker coldly snapped, "Cut the nonsense." But Camus stubbornly argued, "How is it nonsense? I'm grading my future husband." Viker asked, confused, "Why would I be your future husband?" Camus responded as if it were obvious. "What do you mean, why? You passed my test, didn't you?" Suddenly, Viker remembered something from the past. Wait, is she talking about something that happened 7 years ago? That was when he was training with Adolph Morg and won in front of Camus and Viker's father. "I'll fight you with a bucket of water on your head. If you manage to spill even a drop, you win. Focusing on a single point can help, but it all depends on who your opponent is." Camus was furious, expressing her frustration. "How dare Uncle decide who my husband is based on a silly little test like that? It's so maddening. Because of your decision, my love life is basically over. It's ridiculous. I had already made a promise. It felt like we were technically married. But what else can I do? I made a promise, so I have to stick to it. Ugh, no matter how much I dislike it, I still have to follow through. I have to accept it." Viker quietly admitted to himself that she really was a talented fire magic user. Then, out of nowhere, Viker assured her, "I completely forgot about that day. I promise it won't happen again." Camus blushed and pressed her lips together. Frustrated, she threw something like a rag right at his face and exclaimed, "How can you change what's already happened? You idiot." Still fuming, she urged her horse ahead, loudly declaring, "I'm a genius. Once I make a promise, I never forget it." Meanwhile, Viker stood there, still in shock. What did she just throw? He wondered. Looking closer, he realized it was the shirt he had given Camus when they were kids, meant for her to wear as a makeshift cover. "Here, take it," he said. Camus blushed again and replied instinctively, "Oh, it's nothing." Viker fell silent, surprised that Camus still had that shirt. She's returning it without even washing it. Camus continued the conversation. "The barbarians attacked the ruby mine and stole slaves and crops. They take slaves because they can sell them for a good price elsewhere." The two of them walked together toward the front of the fortress. Camus explained, "This wall was built by the sorcerers in just a month." Viker marveled. Those really are the sorcerers of the Morg family. In 1 month, they can accomplish what hundreds of ordinary people would take a year to do. Camus proudly affirmed, "Exactly." Viker glanced at the massive holes scattered across the wall and asked Camus, "Are those marks from the arrows shot by the Black tribe?" Camus nodded and explained in detail, "Yes, their arrows carry incredibly strong aura. At night, countless people have died after being hit by them. These arrows can pierce through walls that are 2 to 3 meters thick. Their power is not something to be taken lightly." She continued, her tone growing more animated as she spoke. "The arrows can even shatter magical shields. My uncle was injured because of that. Luckily, he survived, but his pride took a serious hit." Viker agreed and added with a hint of sympathy, "Come to think of it, our patriarch went through something similar. I heard his nose got broken." Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Viker speculated, "It looks like there are some formidable people on the barbarian side. Do you have any idea who it might be?" Camus wasn't entirely sure, so she used aloud, "I think it's a woman. But since they paint their faces black, it's really hard to tell their gender." Suddenly, a frantic voice called out, "Deputy Leader, you need to get over here quickly." The scouting team had captured someone from the barbarians. Camus was taken by surprise when he heard the news. He instinctively asked, "What?" In the interrogation tent, there was a man tied up, with both his arms and legs bound. He was bald and covered in strange tattoos. Viker noted, "He's from the witch tribe." Camus turned to his men and asked, "Did you manage to get any information?" However, his troops responded with disappointing news. "He hasn't said a word." Camus firmly said, "What about mind control magic? His men hesitantly replied, that didn't work. They are powerful witches. Reading their minds is impossible. Camus then personally confronted the apparent leader, asking, a few days ago, you attacked the stronghold of the Morgue family. Do you remember how many people you captured? With a fierce tone, Camus continued, among the victims is a girl from the Morgue family named Rose. She is my sixth cousin. What have you done to her? Unexpectedly, the man stubbornly and arrogantly responded in the barbarian language. I'm not sure what he said, but the three captured barbarians burst into savage laughter. Camus felt impatient and commanded, translate. What are these barbarians saying? One of Camus's men tried to catch a few words. I only understood a little. When they attacked, everyone was killed and taken away. That's all. Deputy leader. Camus felt helpless because the language barrier made it impossible to interrogate them clearly, so no one can translate what he's saying. Even my men can't help. At that moment, Viker stepped forward to assist. I know a bit of the Rococo tribe's language. Camus skeptically asked, you do. Is there anything you don't know? Viker humbly replied, I'm not very fluent. I just know a few basic words. Camus had no choice but to explain to Viker what he wanted to ask so he could translate. Can you ask where my cousin is? He was captured during the raid. He's only 12 years old with red eyes, red hair, and very pale skin. Viker then used the language of the barbarians to repeat Camus's question. The barbarian sneered, grinning maliciously, and excitedly replied in his tribal tongue. Viker listened, closed his eyes in discomfort, and spoke in a low voice, she's dead. Camus seemed to reach the peak of her rage. She declared angrily, the head of the court isn't here. The leader of the temple is across the territory for an inspection, so all decisions will be made by me. I am Camus Morgue, a member of the clan and the deputy leader of this fortress. With a cold demeanor, Camus announced, I sentence him to immediate execution. As soon as she finished speaking, she thrust her magic into the chest of the barbarian. A spike of earth shot up, surrounded by roaring flames. He screamed in agony in his tribal language. Camus watched his suffering with indifference and said, go ahead, keep talking. She firmly declared, after this battle is over, your language will only be spoken in hell. The three remaining warriors looked at the charred remains of their leader, panic and fear washing over them. Camus decisively turned away and said, let's go. Viker watched her leave, feeling a mix of emotions. Once outside the tent, he was struck by a stark contrast to the coldness she had shown during the interrogation. Camus was now crying, her body trembling with sobs. Viker stepped closer, offering comfort. Despite her tough demeanor, she was only 10 years old. It was clear she shared a close bond with her sibling. Camus hadn't stopped crying, her heart weighed down by memories of her younger sister. Her voice was steady, yet filled with sorrow as she said, yeah, she always followed me around. She was just a naive kid. She never belonged to this cold-blooded family. Viker sympathized, gently trying to console her. Don't be too heartbroken. I'm sure she passed away peacefully. But Camus had known the harsh truth all along. You think I'm a fool? She thought bitterly. I'm a genius. Even if I don't speak their language, I've picked up enough to understand. So tell me, is what I heard true? Viker was taken aback. She noticed already. Camus's fury burned deep as she recalled those hateful words. We ate her. Her emotions, bottled up for too long, finally broke free. Tears streamed down her face as she trembled, trying in vain to hold it all in, but the pain was too much. Her sobs grew louder until she collapsed into uncontrollable, childlike weeping, shattered by despair. Viker stood quietly beside Camus, listening as she blamed herself. I'm sorry for not being able to protect you, she said. He reached out to touch her shoulder, but hesitated, probably worried that she might feel uncomfortable. Instead, Viker chose to stay close to Camus, allowing her to cry and release her emotions. He patiently waited for her to finish. Camus wiped away the remaining tears. It seemed like she had gathered herself, her voice now firm. It's not that big of a deal. If someone is cruel and brutal, I'll just take them out. Although her eyes were still glistening with tears, her gaze was more determined. Now is not the time to mourn. I need to pull myself together quickly so I can get my revenge. Viker smiled and reached out his hand to help Camus stand up. You truly are a hero and no doubt about it. Camus hesitated, unsure about taking his hand. Just as their hands were about to touch, a loud bell rang out urgently. Viker asked, what's that bell for? Camus quickly got to her feet, speaking hurriedly. That's the signal that the barbarians are attacking. Viker responded firmly. The time for her revenge had come swiftly. The stronghold of the Morgue family seemed to be ambushed from outside the palisade. A shadow flickered, hiding behind the bushes. Suddenly, a sharp-clawed foot appeared, riding on a white wolf were the warriors of the Black Tribe. That person drew a bow, aiming straight at the family stronghold. She focused all of her energy into the arrow, making it radiate with a powerful force. She released it, and the arrow shot forward at incredible speed. leaving behind a streak of green light that cut through the air with overwhelming intensity, aimed directly at the upper part of the wall where two guards were stationed. By the time they realized what was happening, the arrow was already too close to avoid. The two of them gasped in shock, and just moments later, the arrow struck, blasting a large section of the wall and sending the guards flying. With the attack initiated, the girl commanded everyone to advance in the black tribal language. The people inside the stronghold were caught off guard by a wave of black warriors riding wolves, fiercely attacking and tearing into them. The sounds of screams echoed everywhere. The wolf-riding girls threw lariats made of rope around the necks of the young men in the stronghold, pulling them up and dragging them along the ground. At that moment, Viker arrived and witnessed the chaos around him. Some people were being captured, others had lost their lives, and some lay unconscious next to piles of bodies. He wondered to himself, did I arrive a bit too early? Suddenly, a noose flew toward Viker. Both black girls expertly caught him by the neck with their ropes. Viker stood there, unfazed as the ropes tightened from the girl's pull, his body remaining steady and unshaken. Feeling pleased with themselves, they spoke to each other in black, saying, "We caught a good one. The hunt for husbands is going well." Viker overheard them and thought, hunting for husbands? Are they trying to capture men to create a new race that's superior to the locals? It was clear what was happening, and there was no need for further investigation. Viker swiftly grabbed the ropes they were using as weapons and said, "Sorry, but I'm not interested in being your husband." He confidently added, "I might already be engaged." The two men standing nearby were stunned for a few seconds as they watched their companions being taken down. Then they quickly raised their bows, ready to fight back. They exchanged glances and asked each other, "Is he an enemy?" 4 arrows shot straight toward Viker. Though he had drawn his sword, Viker hesitated, thinking, Hugo asked me not to rush into things. I can't start a fight before I regroup with the main forces. He felt the tension rise as he considered, should I wait for the main troops to arrive? With a swift move, Viker sliced through the 4 arrows, breaking them in half without a scratch on him. The 2 attackers stared in disbelief, exclaiming, "No way." Camus was also in action, unleashing a fireball that incinerated everything in its path with a wild fury. She scolded Viker for holding back, saying, "What are you doing? Why aren't you killing them?" The 2 men who had shot arrows at Viker perished in the flames, screaming in agony in the language of the Black Tribe. Camus charged into the battle with fierce determination, showing no mercy and no hesitation. Her anger fueled her as she unleashed her top-notch fire magic, shouting, "Die, you barbarian scum!" Viker couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for Camus. He thought to himself, as she really turned this place into a sea of flames. After observing the move Viker had used, Camus asked, "You just used liquid aura, didn't you?" She spoke plainly, "So, you were a graduator? I know you're the only man who could make me acknowledge you." Viker seriously explained why he wasn't engaging the barbarians directly. "I've received orders from the family head to avoid initiating a fight until we meet up with the main forces." Camus had no intention of backing down. She fully focused on casting the 4 flames formation, her determination to wipe out the barbarians clear. That's an order from the Baskerville family head, right? Well, a Baskerville clan member shouldn't interfere in this. The infernal fire formation erupted, burning everything in its path with deadly intent, fueled by Camus's fierce desire for vengeance. "Because I will eliminate all of them myself." The deafening sound of explosions followed in rapid succession. The overwhelming force made Viker hesitant to intervene. That fire, it's 4 flames. She's increased the destructive power. Camus continued gathering fireballs. "I will avenge my sister." Suddenly, a member of the Black Tribe ambushed Camus with a blowpipe, hitting her right in the neck. She barely had time to exclaim, "Ah, is this a dart?" The attacker stood back, watching as Camus collapsed on the ground. Feeling helpless, she said, "It seems I've been poisoned, I'm paralyzed, I can't move my body anymore." This situation left Viker at a loss for words, unable to react quickly. All he could do was sigh, "I really don't know what to say to her anymore." The attacker threw a lasso at Camus, who lay motionless, but Viker managed to intercept it. Camus could still speak, and she quickly praised Viker, saying, "You did well catching that." Holding tight to the lasso, Viker turned to Camus and suggested, "I think it's better for us to retreat." Of course, Camus disagreed. But what about the farm and the people who have been captured? Viker patiently explained it's better not to engage in any more battles until the main forces from Baskerville arrive. But Camus stood firm, insisting, "No, I need to avenge my sister, who was taken by those barbarians." Viker remained adamant, urging, "Make a more reasonable decision." Suddenly, Viker sensed something, an overwhelming, terrifying power, closing in on him. He barely dodged in time, narrowly escaping death. He quickly turned to the direction the arrow had come from. As he pondered, could that destructive force be the person Camus once mentioned? Lost in thought, Viker failed to notice a member of the barbarians sneaking up behind him. The attacker moved swiftly, grabbing Camus, who lay motionless on the ground, and ordered his massive wolf to retreat at full speed. Viker couldn't react in time. He could only watch helplessly as Camus was taken away. Her voice echoed faintly, calling out his name. His heart sank as a chilling thought crossed his mind. Is everything really falling apart now? In the past, when Camus Moore was still a young girl, she had been captured once before. But it didn't last long. She single-handedly wiped out the barbarian squad and returned safely. After that incident, she earned the title Queen of Leru Eleno. Even so, Viker knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. But this hesitation cost him. While he was still weighing his options, Camus suddenly launched an attack on him. After delivering a powerful, threatening blow, Viker stepped back. He quickly braced himself, ready to block her second fierce strike. She's attacking with a bow, he wondered. She kicked him hard in the stomach, forcing him to stagger backward, his guard still up. Viker noticed her movement was different from others. Do I need to go all out? Suddenly, Viker froze, thinking he had misheard. But no, she was speaking in normal language, not barbarian. The two of them stood facing each other, each wary of the other. She continued, "You and I, we've met again." She seemed excited, her thoughts cursing Viker silently. Standing in front of him, she spoke slowly, word by word. "I told you before, we'd meet again." With that, a sleek grin curled at the corner of her mouth. Her eyes seemed to glow with a fierce determination as she locked eyes with him. Viker was stunned. At that moment, he realized the image of a shy, bashful girl from before flashed in his mind. Then he remembered the person he had met at the slave auction. Remembering everything, Viker furrowed his brow and asked, "Are you repaying kindness with hatred?" She replied calmly in her imperfect language, "I, a slave, seek revenge. The kidnapper is the Morg tribe, not you." As soon as she finished speaking, she jumped onto the back of her white wolf. She declared coolly, "I will take revenge the way I was once treated. We will capture the woman in charge. Follow me if you want." At her invitation, Viker hesitated, wondering if he should show his strength. While he was deep in thought, a group of people ran toward them, shouting, "Camus!" Just as Viker was trying to wrap his head around who was coming, Adolf Moore arrived, having rushed over after hearing about the attack. Without wasting any time, he summoned magic and angrily shouted, "How dare you? Give my grandchild back." With Adolf's shout, the ground beneath them cracked open, chasing after the girl and her white wolf. But she was unfazed. Along with her tribe, she skillfully rode her wolf, dodging all obstacles and escaping. Once the last silhouette of the girl had disappeared into the distance, Adolf came to a stop. Frustrated, he couldn't help but mutter, "Damn it." Viker, standing behind him, felt a mix of tension and worry as he surveyed the chaotic scene that resembled a battlefield. He thought, "Wow, I never expected they could finish the ambush in just 3 minutes after the alarm went off." Things became more complicated due to Camus's carelessness and lack of experience. Suddenly, Viker noticed someone speaking near where Adolf was arguing. The person said, "I think they ran toward the restricted area in the Leru Eleno Mountains." Hearing this, Adolf's heart sank. The restricted area of Leru Eleno, he exclaimed, feeling a wave of fear. He couldn't believe it. The restricted area was still uncharted and filled with danger. Going there at night was like signing a death warrant. His granddaughter had been captured, but what could he do? As Adolf sat in despair, unsure of what to do next, a voice broke through the gloom. "We can go after them." Surprised, Adolf turned around. Viker raised his hand calmly and explained, "I've been in the forest before." In his mind, he thought, before I rewound, using reconnaissance and pursuit, I had already passed through that place. Adolf hurriedly grabbed Viker and asked again, "Are you serious?" One of his subordinates spoke up to remind him, "Sir, heading towards Mount Leru Eleno right now is suicide." Before the man could finish, Adolf interrupted him, stubbornly saying, "Whoever doesn't want to go can stay behind. I won't punish anyone for it." He observed the young man in front of him and silently thought, "I know this kid is not ordinary. I have no choice but to trust him." Adolf sincerely pleaded, "Everything depends on you. Please save my granddaughter." The mystical moonlight pierced through the dark clouds, illuminating everything below. The scene before them unfolded, a fence with a warning sign blocking outsiders from entering. This was the Law Eleno Forest in the Baskerville territory. It was home to bone-sucking mosquitoes, poisonous, silent spiders, and many other dangerous creatures. Ordinary people wouldn't survive here. That's why it was known as the flesh-eating forest. A chilling, eerie atmosphere enveloped the entire forest. However, a figure suddenly jumped up onto a tree trunk. It turned out to be Viker's group leading the way. With their exceptional speed, the others had to push themselves to keep up. Adolf, slightly surprised, asked, "Can all the children from the Baskerville family do that?" Staffordshire immediately replied, "Of course not." Out of nowhere, 2 giant beads with red eyes appeared. Only the young master is a special case. True to his words, Viker rushed forward, drawing his sword from his waist. With a smooth swing, he effortlessly cut down the bees. The three Boro brothers, witnessing this, displayed expressions of admiration, their eyes shining brightly as they simultaneously reflected on it. A while later, Viker crouched behind a tree, keeping a wary eye on the surroundings. He raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop, leaving them confused about what was happening. In front of them, a flickering red light filled the air. Viker assessed the situation and said, "Looks like they haven't run too far." He then gave a serious order. "I've heard that black hunters crush dry leaves around them to listen for anyone tailing them. We need to be extra cautious from here on." Adolf raised his hand and cast a silence spell on Viker's feet. Noticing Viker looked confused, he smiled gently and explained, "This spell helps you move without making any noise. From now on, I'll rely on you, and I won't forget this favor, nephew-in-law." Viker didn't truly understand what the old man meant and thought, nephew-in-law? The flickering light from the fire illuminated the gathering of the Black Clan members around them. Meanwhile, Camus was tied to a tree, yelling nonstop, "You barbarian bastards. Once I get free, I'll burn you all to ashes. You'll see my magic. Just wait for it." She kept shouting to herself, but no one paid her any mind. Some women from the clan were busy chatting with one another. One of them said, "I like that guy from earlier." The other sighed and replied, "I think the husband hunt has failed." Camus huffed in frustration, annoyed that they weren't listening to her. She recalled overhearing them talk about hunting for husbands and wives before. While she was lost in thought, perhaps realizing this was why they ambushed her a footstep forward. A man with a scruffy beard watched her closely. He spoke in a creepy tone, saying, "Now that we captured this woman, every man in the tribe will want her." Camus shouted back angrily, "You crazy bastard, what are you planning to do with me? Just kill me already." The man scratched his ear, looking innocent as he replied, "I don't understand what she's saying, but just looking into her eyes, it's clear she's a rebellious one." As he spoke, he squeezed her cheek tightly. He picked up an arrow, his expression turning sinister as he licked the tip and threatened, "I think this proud little slave needs to be taught a lesson." Just then, a girl approached coolly and said, "Ahun, stay away from my slave." Ahun, clearly annoyed, replied, "What do you mean, Commander Ayan? I captured her." Ayan, unfazed, shot back, "You fool." After clearing his throat, he grew furious and asked, "What do you mean by that? I was the one who shot the arrow and set the trap." Ayan remained calm and responded, "Then who delivered the results? If I hadn't stopped that kid with the sword, you would be dead right now." Ahun, clearly unwilling to back down, asked again, "So, you're saying this woman is your prize?" Ayan crossed her arms with an air of arrogance and replied, "Of course." On the side, Camus, still confused by the situation, tried to make sense of what was happening. Is this some kind of internal conflict? I'm sure she's their leader. Her name is Ayan, but no one here seems to care about my opinion. Ahun continued to question his leader, "But you're a woman." The commander remained calm and asked back, "And so?" Camus, observing the interaction, analyzed the situation seriously. "Ayan, she's fighting on equal footing with Viker, a graduator. If I want to escape, I'll have to get past her." Meanwhile, Ahun, still pointing his finger at Ayan, continued his challenge. "I won't let you do whatever you want just because you're in charge." Finally, Ayan lost her patience. Anger flared in her eyes as she raised her hand, now glowing with magical energy. Her voice was sharp and threatening. "If you got a problem, come face me anytime, Ahun. I'll show you what happens when you cross me." Ahun immediately felt the weight of her threat. Sweat trickled down his face as fear gripped him, his confidence shattered by the sheer power radiating from her. Ahun quickly raised his hand to apologize, saying, "I don't object." Ayan looked at him with wide, cold eyes and asked, "Really? It's fine." Ahun immediately replied, "Yes, I give up. Do whatever you want, Commander." After saying this, he hurriedly walked away. Camus watched the whole exchange and concluded that it seemed like she had won. Suddenly, Ayan spoke up, "Your eyes are as good as your abilities. You truly come from a good lineage, the next patriarch of the Morg family." Before Camus could process what was happening, Ayan kicked her hard in the shoulder and said, "I was captured by your Morg family and sold into slavery. However, I was lucky enough to have someone help me escape that life." Ayan recalled the moment Viker saved her that day. He had stood there looking at her and said in the black language, "Go ahead, but you won't be as lucky as I was." As she spoke, Ayan's gaze was icy, as if she were delivering a judgment rather than just making a statement. It becomes even clearer. Ayan continued, "When I say this, I will teach you a lesson that you will remember deeply. Your daily task will be to kneel and lick my feet." Camus heard this and frowned, feeling alert. Suddenly, an explosion went off right behind Ayan. She turned around in shock and shouted, "An explosion!" One of the tribe members was engulfed in flames. The others quickly went on the defensive, shouting loudly, "It's an ambush." Light footsteps approached. A figure stood amidst the fire, shouting, "Cruel barbarians, I come to make you pay for what you've done." Camus felt a rush of joy as he recognized the voice, Uncle. Adolf and his group moved forward, and he raised his hand, using magic to demand, "Return my granddaughter immediately." The Black Tribe members immediately became wary, eyeing them with caution. Adolf's group charged in to attack the tribe members. Meanwhile, our main character, Viker, was perched on a branch, observing everything. He sensed something was off and thought, "Something feels strange. Why are the Black Hunters, who ambushed so skillfully, now in such chaos?" Viker watched as the Black Tribe members were easily killed and scattered in panic, filled with doubt. Some members of the tribe climbed onto the wolves' backs, cursing, "You bastards, how dare you cause trouble in the forest in the middle of the night?" Seeing someone preparing to leave, Adolf immediately gave the order, "They're running away. Don't let anyone live." Camus, feeling proud, said, "Are you scared now, you barbarians?" Suddenly, a noise behind her startled Camus, making her straighten up. She cautiously looked behind, only to see Viker signaling for her to remain silent. But before she could stop herself, Camus shouted his name, Viker. Viker calmly cut the rope, tying her hands with his sword. He gently caught Camus and asked, "Were you coming to save me?" And knowing Viker replied, "Didn't you know that gesture means stay quiet?" As expected, a figure appeared in front of them, blocking their path. The person spoke calmly, "You were good with that sword. I knew you'd come." The person rested a hand on their waist and continued praising Viker. "Your physical strength helped you find your way here quickly. Your sharp mind let you see clearly in the darkness of the forest. And your strong love made you risk everything for the girl." It turned out the person was Ayan, and she confidently declared, "I won't ask about your past. You passed." Viker was confused. "Past? What did I pass?" He watched as Ayan and Camus exchanged looks, their gazes locking like a battle of lightning. Without thinking much, Viker allowed Camus to lean closer to him. He thought to himself, "Even though it's impossible right now, why can't I remember anyone like her from my past life?" Viker observed Ayan, her face flushed with anger and wonder. Could she be someone who managed to avoid Hugo's scrutiny? The Black Knight Hunter? But as he thought about it more, something didn't add up. She's too young and inexperienced to be that person. Or maybe she's related to the Night Hunter by blood. While Viker was lost in thought, he didn't realize that a weapon was aimed at him from a distance. A dart flew toward him, but luckily Viker quickly raised his arm to shield Camus. Behind the bushes, Ahun, who was holding the weapon, was stunned. What? How did he know? Viker calmly picked up Camus as if she were a princess, causing her to flinch. He coolly said, "Things are getting more complicated. Just hold on a bit. I'll take you to your uncle." Camus blushed and replied, "Okay." The young girl's heart raced. She thought to herself, "He's speaking so normally. Maybe he's just worried about the poison." The two quickly moved away, leaving her standing there alone. She helplessly scratched her head and sighed, "Oh man, I just want him to come home with me." Meanwhile, Viker carried Camus and asked her if she felt seriously poisoned. Camus blushed again and said, "I think so." Suddenly, two figures appeared ahead, aiming arrows at them. Viker swiftly drew his sword to block the incoming arrows. Another bowstring was drawn. Ayan took aim and even added a layer of magic to the arrowhead. Her eyes gleamed with intent as she said, "Should we deal with that girl more?" She released the arrow, which shot forth with great power, narrowly grazing behind Viker. Sensing danger, Viker quickly turned around, but at that moment, the arrow was just inches away. It was aimed at Camus, who was puzzled as to why he had stopped. Just as the arrow was about to strike her eye, several chunks of ice appeared. The arrow pierced through the ice and halted right in front of Camus's face. It turned out that Adolf had been nearby, using his magic to save his granddaughter. In a hurry, he asked, "Are you okay, my dear?" Camus shouted, "Uncle!" Adolf cast a spell to neutralize the poison affecting her. Worried, he supported his only granddaughter, saying, "This is serious. You're heavily poisoned. I can't remove it all. When we get back, we should stop by Divine Quo Vadis." Suddenly, Camus pushed him away gently and said politely, "Excuse me for a moment, Uncle." Before Adolf could understand what was happening, Camus dashed over and hugged Viker, exclaiming, "You saved me again, Viker." Adolf could only stand there, mouth agape, calling out to Camus. He was misty-eyed as he said, "Your uncle did his best too." But Camus shot back coldly, "Why did you show up so late?" "I'm telling Mom." Suddenly, a rope fell on Viker's head. Ayan, who had been behind him for who knows how long, pulled the rope tightly around Viker's neck, trying to drag him toward her. But he didn't move an inch. She thought to herself, "He's not backing down at all. How is he so strong?" Worried, Ayan shouted, "You better just give in and let yourself be caught. I don't have time for this." Camus frowned and irritably replied, "It's you again." Viker calmly snapped the rope, ignoring the annoyed girl behind him and focusing instead on Ayan's words. "No time? Is there a reason the block are in such a hurry? Then, a face that looked neither human nor demonic appeared. A dark shadow enveloped the entire forest, creating a very eerie atmosphere. Ayan, frightened, looked up at the sky and slowly backed away, saying, "Shit, did it finally notice?" Viker noticed the signs of Beelzebub spreading down his arm. He observed that it showed no signs of stopping and thought to himself, "The Beelzebub in my veins is warning me that something is coming." With a fearful tone, Ayan spoke up, "She's coming." This only deepened Viker's suspicion. He noticed the visible tension and fear on Ayan's face. Then she shouted, "Madam Eight Legs." As soon as she spoke, something appeared, shooting straight up into the sky. The Black Tribe members were equally alarmed. "Is it Madame? Is she really here?" Camus, staring at the object now standing upright, asked, "A pillar?" Viker immediately dismissed it. No way. The strange object emitted an eerie purple light. Then, from one central point, it branched out in multiple directions. These branches shot down into the ground. Adolf stepped in front of the two, shielding them, while Viker, horrified, said, "This is insane. Can a monster this big really hide in the forest?" Viker became alert, instinctively preparing for battle as he thought, "I can't believe I'm facing this monster here." Indeed, this creature was an S-class disaster. Madam Eight Legs. The creature's appearance was just as its name suggested. It had the form of a spider with eyes and a mouth glowing in ominous red, creating a terrifying sight. It walked right up to the group of Viker and let out a roar to show its strength. The sound was terrifying, shaking everything around them. Adolf quickly stepped in front of the two people nearby, and Viker gasped, "No way. There's actually a monster like that hiding in this forest." Viker stayed alert, ready for anything, as thoughts raced through his mind. "I can't believe I'm facing a creature like this right now. If I remember correctly, its danger level is S, Madam Eight Legs." The monster revealed itself as its name suggested. It looked like a giant spider with glowing red eyes and an unsettling mouth, creating a horrifying image. It moved closer to Viker's group and roared again, showcasing its immense power. The sound echoed menacingly, causing a tremor in the surroundings. Everyone in the group eyed the enormous creature with caution. Camus, maintaining her innocence from earlier, was about to exclaim loudly, "What is that?" "Move." Thankfully, Viker quickly covered her mouth and softly reminded her, "Don't speak too loudly."